Chapter 990. Jurosis was a small border city in the northern part of the European continent. Although it was a border city, its security was good and its development was relatively good. In the past countless years, the Dark Knights had established a strict order here and formed a law enforcement team with the local police department. It was no exaggeration to say that even in the entire European continent, Jurosis's security was among the best. This was the city that the Dark Knights had the deepest influence on. Because less than 80 kilometers away from this city was the headquarters of the Dark Knights, which straddled the border between the two countries. Most of the time, any movement in Jurosis was under the eyes of the Dark Knights. At this moment, it had become the temporary station of the joint forces. A week ago, led by the forces of the Sanctuary, Knights Templars, the Jiang family of South America, Jifeng Sword Raining School, Wuji Palace, the forces of Snow Country led by Wang Xiaoyao, and a large number of other forces in the Dark World who chose to stand with the Sanctuary entered Jurosis with great force. They booked the most luxurious Carlson Hotel in Jurosis. In a week, the people of the joint forces brazenly swaggered through the streets of Jurosis and mocked the Dark Knights under the eyes of the Dark Knights. This was no longer a provocation, it was almost a declaration of war. The friction between the joint forces and the Dark Knights had almost never stopped in the past 6 months. They entered Nusan, the headquarters of the Dark Knights, in a high-profile manner. They advanced from city to city. Where there was an attack, there was resistance. In half a year, the war between the Dark Knights and the joint forces had spread all over Nusan. The living space of the Dark Knights was getting smaller and smaller, and the joint forces were constantly approaching the core area of the Dark Knights. Finally, a week ago, they officially arrived in Jurosis. The headquarters of the Dark Knights was close at hand. It could even be said to be the headquarters of the Dark Knights. They were really fighting all the way to their own gate. Today, the number of people of the joint forces in Jurosis had exceeded 1,200. It was a joint force of nearly 20 forces. In the Carlson Hotel, except for the waiters, everyone who appeared in the hotel could be regarded as an elite force in the Dark World. The joint forces had been here for a whole week. The Dark Knights remained silent about this. The seemingly aggressive joint forces also stopped here and did not choose to attack the headquarters of the Dark Knights. Both sides maintained restraint at an extremely close distance, not interfering with each other's business. As far as the Dark Knights were concerned, the strength they had lost in the chaos of Snow Country was not something that could be recovered in 2 years. Although the Allied forces could break through Nuwa Forest, it was impossible for them to directly occupy Nuwa Forest. As long as the Dark Knights could stabilize the situation, there was no need for them to risk their lives against them. Some debts could be settled slowly in the future. As for the joint forces, there was no need for them to risk their lives to fight against the Dark Knights. Even if the Dark Queen was injured, she was still an expert close to the peak of the invincible realm. If she was injured, no one in the whole European continent could stop her if she was forced into a corner. The situation in the European continent was as stable as a pool of stagnant water. Without an absolutely good opportunity, even if the foreign forces could gain a foothold, their development would not be too good. This was never the battlefield of the real final battle. They came here to hold the Dark Queen back and prevent her from participating in the most critical final battle in Beihai. This was tantamount to depriving the enemy of a helper close to the peak of the invincible realm. Today's situation was very good. Thousands of experts and elites entered Jurosis at the same time. Such a force was not something that the empty Dark Knights could easily provoke. And they were right under the enemy's nose, which was enough to bring great pressure to the Dark Knights. At the same time, they could let the enemy see what they were doing and not do anything desperate. The two sides were in a stalemate like this. After the final battle in Beihai, if the Dark Queen did not show up, they would naturally retreat quickly. The whole of Nuwa Forest would still be the world of the Dark Knights. The two sides seemed to have reached a tacit understanding. So the first half of the night, which was most likely to have a conflict, was about to pass. Inside the Carlson Hotel, it was almost late at night, but the conference room on the top floor of the hotel was still brightly lit. Cigarette smoke wafted in the conference room. The conference room was full of people. The troops formed by more than 20 forces were in the Carlson Hotel. At this moment, the person in charge of each force was participating in this meeting. I like the Dark Knights who are so tactful. Look at how well behaved they are now. A strong black man with a lot of tattoos on his face was holding a cigar with his thick fingers and smiling playfully. So what if they don't know what's good for them? In a cold voice, an Asian man's eyes were gloomy. We are only dozens of kilometers away from the headquarters of the Dark Knights. The Dark Queen is injured, so she won't waste her energy to fight us head-on. It's meaningless. If she dares to leave the Dark Knights to support Beihai, we will destroy the headquarters of the Dark Knights as soon as she leaves. It's just a distance of dozens of kilometers. She won't be able to fly back even if she wants to. You don't seem very satisfied with this result. A petite woman leaning lazily on the chair laughed. Li Si, do you want to avenge Milos? Li Si glanced at her coldly. When he saw who she was, his eyes softened a little. This East Island woman named Kurai Hongye came from Wuji Palace. When East Island put almost all its energy on Beihai, only less than 100 warriors from East Island and Jifeng Sword Raining School came to Europe. There were only 2 Thundershocking realm experts, and Kurai Hongye was one of them. Li Si was naturally not afraid of her, but the problem was that she was still in his bed last night. She was just an ordinary Thundershocking realm expert under the bed, while Kurai Hongye in bed was comparable to an expert at the peak of the invincible realm in some fields. Li Si was served so comfortably that he almost ascended to heaven, and he was still savoring it. In the face of such a woman, no matter how indifferent he was, he couldn't give her a hard time. Seeming to notice Li Si's softened eyes, Kurai Hongye chuckled. Her eyes moved, revealing a touch of seduction and charm that was not concealed at all. Li Si swallowed, shook his head slowly, and said blandly, I just have some regrets. Although I know the possibility is not high, I have always been looking forward to executing an invincible realm expert. Li Si, the second executioner of the Jiang family of South America, an expert a half-step to the invincible realm, was also one of the strongest experts in the joint forces in Europe at this time. The executioners of the Jiang family of South America represented their high-end power. There were not many of them, similar to the 12 super masters of Samsara Palace. The chief executioner, Milos, whose strength was comparable to that of an invincible realm expert, was besieged and killed by the assassin organization some time ago. The assassins then turned to the Dark Knights. As the second executioner, Li Si had long been suppressing his anger. He really hoped that the Dark Knights could do something tonight. As long as he performed well in this battle, he was very likely to be promoted to the chief executioner. From the second executioner to the chief seemed to be just a title, but it meant that he could be promoted by half a level in the Jiang family of South America. Countless glory, splendor, and wealth were included in this half a level of authority. Li Si subconsciously glanced at an old man sitting in the main seat. The old man closed his eyes and rested, motionless. But Li Si was very clear that among all the people present, the old man and he were also people who hoped that the Dark Knights could do something. The other party came from the tribunal of the sanctuary and was the number 2 arbitrator of the tribunal. From the standpoint of the sanctuary, the other party naturally hoped to take advantage of this opportunity to completely destroy the Dark Knights tonight. Time passed slowly in the conference room. The night grew darker. The Dark Knights were still quiet. The hearts of the people present gradually became relaxed. Their task here was to use the headquarters of the Dark Knights to contain flaming fire. The final battle in Beihai had begun. If there was a battle, it would probably happen tonight. Until now, the Dark Knights had not moved. Obviously, the other party seemed to have chosen to give up. A sigh of regret suddenly sounded. The number 2 arbitrator of the sanctuary, who had been sitting in the main seat with his eyes closed, opened his eyes and chuckled. Everyone was looking at him. As the strongest person in the northern European continent of the joint forces, the arbitrator had absolute authority in the conference room. It seems that tonight his voice rang and was quickly interrupted by the phone ringing. In the middle of the conference table, a tall man from Snow Country frowned and took out his mobile phone to look at the number. His face changed. He apologized and directly picked up the phone. The person on the other end of the phone said something quickly. The man from Snow Country suddenly looked extremely gloomy. Not only him, but the faces of several people sitting near him also changed. General Tarkov, what happened? The arbitrator narrowed his eyes and asked slowly. Tarkov, who looked extremely gloomy, put down his mobile phone, glanced at the arbitrator, and moved the corner of his mouth. His voice was a little hoarse. Everyone, there is a problem with our surveillance system. It turns out that the Dark Queen has now left the headquarters of the Dark Knights and is on her way to Beihai. The first news that came back was that the Dark Queen has taken off from the airport of the Arctic Ocean Corps in Wulon State. The conference room suddenly fell silent for a moment. The next moment, there was an uproar. How is it possible? What are you talking about? How dare she leave the Dark Knights? Does she no longer care about the life and death of the Dark Knights? In the chaotic voices, the arbitrator snorted coldly. Silence. There was a slight pause in the conference room. The arbitrator stood up and looked at Tarkov, who was still holding the phone. The Dark Queen appeared in Wulon State. Are you sure? It's the military airport of the Arctic Ocean Corps. She took off 15 minutes ago. The military of Snow Country has received the news. I can be sure. Tarkov nodded. Can you stop her? Or shoot down the plane? The arbitrator asked subconsciously. The conference room became even quieter. Tarkov looked at the arbitrator as if he were a madman and said nothing. Stop her? Even if he could stop her, so what? The Dark Queen was an expert who was close to the peak of the invincible realm. He could stop her, but could he? As for shooting down the plane, it was even more nonsense. The Dark Queen took the military plane of the Arctic Ocean Corps. If it was shot down by Snow Country, flaming fire would die. It was tantamount to Snow Country slapping Zhongzhou State in the face. Even if Wang Xiaoyao completely ruled Snow Country, he would not dare to do such a crazy thing. The arbitrator seemed to know that his question was inappropriate, so he was silent for a long time. In the solemn atmosphere, he suddenly smiled and said in a self-deprecating manner, "It seems that the Dark Knights don't take us seriously." Li Si stood up with a cold expression. Everyone, our task is to restrain the Dark Queen here, but now she has secretly left the headquarters of the Dark Knights. That is to say, our task has failed. I don't want to accept any form of failure. Anyone who makes me fail will pay a heavy price, a price that she doesn't want to think about. So, the arbitrator remained calm. Attack the headquarters of the Dark Knights. Li Si said with a grim smile, kill all the people of the Dark Knights and destroy all their buildings. The Dark Queen still remembers that she chose to help Li Tianlan in the Samsara Palace. Then we will directly destroy her Dark Knights. It's useless for her to regret it. We still have to be cautious. An expert of the thunder-shocking realm from a second-class force in the Dark World said hesitantly, if the Dark Queen dares to leave the headquarters of the Dark Knights, then there must be a trap in the headquarters. Maybe, of course there is a trap. Li Si interrupted him coldly, but there is an undeniable fact that the strength of the Dark Knights is not at its peak. We have swept through the whole of moving forest, but the strength of the Dark Knights is hiding like a dog. Without the Dark Queen, the strength of the headquarters of the Dark Knights is even more vulnerable. There must be a trap there, but I don't think the so-called trap can put us in danger. The strength of the opponent is obvious. We may encounter trouble, but tonight, the Dark Knights will definitely become history. He glanced at the arbitrator. What do you think? The arbitrator was silent for a few seconds and said calmly, it doesn't matter what I think. What matters is that we failed to restrain the Dark Queen. Now the headquarters of the Dark Knights is in front of us. Everyone, are we really going to do nothing? The corner of his mouth twitched. The sanctuary can't afford to lose face like this. In that case, let's go now and finish the battle as soon as possible. In the conference room, another expert at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm stood up and said, finish the battle as soon as possible. If everything goes well, after we destroy the Dark Knights, We will probably have time to go to Beihai. To be honest, compared with here, Beihai is the real feast. If we can't miss it, I don't think anyone will, right? The arbitrator smiled, nodded, and said, okay, then the phone rang again. This time, it was from the arbitrator's cell phone. The arbitrator frowned and looked at his watch subconsciously. It was 12:00 midnight in the European continent. It seemed that from this moment on, the originally calm situation suddenly became a little different. He took a deep breath, picked up the phone, and answered, hello. In the next second, his expression suddenly changed. Bang! A dark blue electric arc exploded from his body without warning. A strong wind blew in the conference room, and the solid wood conference table was completely shattered by the spread of the electric arc. The arbitrator held the phone tightly, and his face suddenly showed a crazy killing intent. The sanctuary is under attack? Word by word, he repeated the news he had just heard. Everyone's face changed dramatically. Who is it? The arbitrator asked, gritting his teeth. There was an extremely chaotic sound on the other side of the phone. Fighting and explosions kept ringing out, and it was noisy. A sharp voice came from the other end of the phone, and it was hysterical. It's the Dark Knights. Among them are the Duke and General of the Samsara Palace. They broke into the Holy Palace and number 2 was killed. We need support, support. His sharp voice almost rang through the whole conference room through the phone. Everyone heard his voice. A call for help. The corner of the arbitrator's mouth twitched. A call for help. Their current position was at the border between Norway and Navia. If they asked for help, it meant that even if they set off immediately, they would have to leave Norway, pass through Northland, pass through Germany, and finally pass through the headquarters of the Lin clan before returning to Italos. This was the shortest straight-line distance. Even if they could make it in time, this road was not easy to travel. Norden was easy to handle, but there were several main forces of the Shadow Throne in Germany, and they could all be regarded as allies of the Wang family of Beihai. These forces might not be able to spare too much strength to support Beihai, but at this critical point, if their joint forces appeared in Germany, it was not a problem for the other party to stop them. The most important thing was that after passing through Germany, they had to pass through a country to reach Italos. That country was the territory of the Lin clan. Lin Fengting was in South America at this time. His attitude was clear. It was not hard to imagine what would happen to their joint forces once they entered the territory of the Lin clan. Did they really think that the Lin clan had no temper at all? The arbiter's breathing was trembling due to extreme anger. He could not explain the distance. Norway was indeed far away from Italos. But relatively speaking, they were the closest force to the sanctuary at this time. Protect His Majesty. The arbitrator said in a deep voice, I will hurry to support you. Crack. The phone was crushed in his hand. The arbitrator's face became extremely gloomy. Are you going to withdraw? Li Si raised his eyebrows and asked directly. Withdraw? The arbitrator suddenly turned around and looked at Li Si. How can we withdraw? Now that we are here, it will be too late for us to go back. Li Si's eyes lit up and he became excited. So? The arbitrator's eyes seemed to be burning with raging fire. With a resolute expression, he said word by word, kill them. Destroy the headquarters of the Dark Knights, and then we will rush back to the sanctuary. We have received definite news that it was the Dark Knights who attacked the sanctuary, which means that their only strength has appeared in the sanctuary, and the headquarters of the Dark Knights has no strength left. Recently, we have been monitoring the movements of the headquarters of the Dark Knights. Dark Queen can sneak out, Sin can sneak out, but not everything can be quietly transferred. There are a lot of their technology and top-secret intelligence information in the headquarters of the Dark Knights. We will destroy the headquarters of the Dark Knights, collect everything that can be collected, and then immediately return to support. Li Si's eyes became brighter and brighter, and finally, the smile spread to his whole face. I like your decision, he said softly. The arbitrator didn't waste any time and said, let's go. On the phone, he could feel the fierce attack that the sanctuary was suffering, but he couldn't imagine the specific scene. In fact, no matter what the scene was, it was meaningless to him. He couldn't rush back in a short time, and it was even more impossible for him to let the Dark Knights go. The Dark Knights were robbing the house. He could only choose to change houses with them. He wasn't sure if the defenseless sanctuary could hold on, but at least he was sure that His Majesty would be fine. As long as His Majesty was fine, the sanctuary would still be the sanctuary after the battle. The emergency gathering signal spread quickly in the hotel. In a short time, the elites of all the forces in the entire hotel started to move. In front of the hotel, one after another, ordinary-looking luxury buses lined up and drove over. It was silent near the Carlson Hotel. Everyone received the order. Without any nonsense, more than 1,000 people got on the bus one by one. The bus started in the middle of the night and rushed at full speed to the headquarters of the Dark Knights. The arbitrator sat in the bus at the front with a cold and solemn expression. "Let's finish the battle quickly. When we arrive at the destination, you and I will go first, and the others will cooperate with us. The Dark Knights can sneak attack the sanctuary, so their headquarters can't be too powerful. We will try to finish the battle in half an hour, and then leave some people to clean up the battlefield. We will come back as soon as possible." The arbitrator nodded expressionlessly, but he felt a little bitter in his heart. The task of destroying the headquarters of the Dark Knights was not difficult for him. It was not a problem to finish the battle in half an hour. But the problem was how to go back after the battle. The position of Germany could be put aside. The key was the Lin clan between Germania and Italy. That was the most important thing. The Dark Queen could cross snow country in the plain of the Arctic Ocean Legion. No one dared to stop her, let alone shoot her down. But if their plane dared to cross the sky of the Lin clan had never spoiled anyone. They would do whatever they wanted without hesitation. He took a deep breath, looked at the night outside the window, and didn't speak for a long time. It was quiet in the bus. The bus rushed forward at full speed, rushed out of the city, and rushed onto the road, from faster and faster to slower. What's going on? Feeling the change in the speed of the bus, the arbitrator frowned slightly. The road ahead has been destroyed. The driver stopped the bus and looked at the road ahead. His voice was a little awkward. The arbitrator stood up and looked ahead, his face getting colder and colder. The road ahead was relatively narrow, and the smooth road had been destroyed. Even the most luxurious off-road vehicle couldn't drive through, let alone the bus. The arbitrator gritted his teeth and said in a deep voice, "How far is it?" 30, no, 27 kilometers. The driver stammered. This distance was really a little subtle. All the people present were masters. This distance was not a problem for them, but if they were to march quickly, they would also consume some of their physical strength. The arbitrator's eyes were scarlet. He gritted his teeth, picked up the walkie-talkie next to him, and said coldly, "Get off the bus, let's rush over. Kill all the Dark Knights and rush with me." Under the night sky, the road lit up one after another. Blue electric arcs and blazing flames shone with each other. Thousands of elites of the United Forces rushed through the completely destroyed road. Endless light kept flashing, getting farther and farther away. Without any pause, the arbitrator, who was filled with anger, took the lead and rushed to a place less than 5 kilometers away from the Dark Knights' headquarters. The crowd began to slow down. The arbitrator adjusted his breathing, looked at his watch, and said in a deep voice, "Rest for 10 minutes and get ready for battle." 10 minutes passed in silence. The crowd of the United Forces reunited again. The ground kept shaking. Vaguely, the outline of the huge building of the Dark Knights' headquarters appeared in everyone's sight. The arbitrator stared at the magnificent gate of the Dark Knights' headquarters, which was nearly 20 meters tall. His eyes were extremely cruel. Creak, amidst the roaring footsteps, a strange sound suddenly sounded. The magnificent gate in the distance seemed to move. The arbitrator opened his eyes wide subconsciously. Creak, the sound from afar came again, and it was extremely clear. The huge gate of the Dark Knight's headquarters moved slowly and opened bit by bit. Stop! The arbitrator suddenly stopped and stared in the direction of the gate. For some reason, he instinctively sensed that something was wrong, and he became a little uneasy. Creak, the sound of metal rubbing became clearer and clearer. The gate opened wider and wider. The sound of neat and uniform footsteps came from the direction of the Dark Knight's headquarters. It seemed that countless people were slowly moving forward in the same rhythm. A row of figures appeared in the gradually opened gate. 10 people in a row. Countless figures formed an incomparably neat formation and walked out of the Dark Knight's headquarters row after row. Silent, determined, iron-blooded, determined. More and more people walked out of the gate, and in the blink of an eye, there were more than 50 rows. Then, there were 100 rows. The number of people was still increasing, and people kept walking out as if there was no end. The arbitrator's body stiffened, and he looked at the scene with a dull face. The people at the back walked out. The people at the front were advancing. 200 rows. 300 rows. 500 rows. Everyone in the United Forces was stunned. 500 rows. A total of 5,000 people. How could there be so many people in the Dark Knight's headquarters? No, each of these soldiers had an oriental face and were yellow-skinned. The arbitrator's breath stopped. Soldiers of Zhongzhou State. Soldiers? For a moment, the arbitrator's hair all over his body stood on end. He finally knew the source of his uneasiness. The more than 1,000 people of the United Forces were all real elites and experts. On the battlefield, each of them could fight against at least 10 enemies. In a normal state, 5,000 people would not be taken seriously by him. But the 5,000 people in front of him. Neat and uniform footsteps, the same rhythm, the same mentality, the same fighting spirit, and the same confidence. The 5,000 soldiers in front of him gave him the feeling that they were exactly the same person. This was a disciplined army of 5,000 people. The arbitrator had only felt such momentum in the Holy Disarmament Corps at its peak. And it was not the entire Holy Disarmament Corps, but a small part of the top Holy Disarmament Corps that had such momentum. There was no doubt that the 5,000 soldiers in front of him could be said to be the top elites even in all countries in the world. Even in Zhongzhou State, there were very few such troops. But now, these 5,000 people had appeared here. The arbitrator had a vague guess in his heart. This kind of terrible army was invincible on the battlefield. There was one near Nusan. The so-called near referred to the distance between Nusan and Zhongzhou State. This army was nearby. The Queen of Darkness went to Beihai from Wulan State. That was Wulan State, wasn't that army in Wulan State? The arbitrator's voice was hoarse. His heart suddenly became extremely cold. He never dreamed that the Dark Knights would play like this. The 5,000 elites stopped less than 300 meters away from the Allied forces. Someone moved forward slowly. He seemed to be the strongest of the elites. He did not answer the arbitrator's words, but opened his hands at the front of the crowd. A piece of blue lightning became brighter and brighter in his hands. Judging from his aura, he was only at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. That seemed to be the opponent's limit. But in the constantly shining lightning, the aura of thousands of people behind him suddenly burned wildly with an extremely violent momentum at the same time with the lightning in his hands. The Oriental figure, who was not very tall, stared at the arbitrator and roared out a military order that made everyone in the United Forces tremble with fear. This seemed to represent the most powerful force on the world battlefield. Invincible and invincible. Snowdance Corps, march. America, Drenvia. The huge and somewhat incredible private manor was decorated into a private garden full of Oriental flavor. There were small bridges, flowing water, pavilions, terraces, and towers. It could almost be said that there was a scenery with every step, and it was beautiful. Even though it was night time in America, the weather wasn't that cool. However, Lin Fengting still liked to stay in the gazebo. Flowing water flowed quietly under his feet. The clear water was covered with beautiful stones of various colors. Through a few tropical plants, Lin Fengting looked at the few rare tropical fish swimming lazily in the water with some fondness. It's really beautiful. Lin Fengting didn't know how many times he had praised the fish. His eyes were filled with joy. He looked at the fish in the water and smiled regretfully. Do you want to take these with you? Sitting opposite Lin Fengting was a middle-aged man with an elegant and gentle temperament. He looked older than Lin Fengting and a little weathered, but he was full of energy. His every move had the unique charm of a mature uncle. Lin Buzheng, the patriarch of the largest branch of the Lin clan in South America. Since his branch left the headquarters many years ago to develop in the Lin clan, Lin Buzheng had been the patriarch of the 6th generation. In nearly 200 years of development, the branch of the Lin clan in South America had almost never gone downhill. Now, in dozens of countries in America, Lin Buzheng might not be one of the few people who stood at the top of the power, but he could be said to be a real power figure infinitely close to the top. Unlike the Lin clan in Europe, which took the high-end route, Lin Buzheng's industry could be regarded as the most among all the branches of the Lin clan. He was involved in all kinds of things, and he was also stained with some gray aura. If this time he had not faced the direct attack of a deep-rooted superpower like the Jiang family of South America, he would not have needed to ask Lin Fengting for help with his foundation in America. Forget it. Lin Fengting looked at the fish in the water and shook his head with a chuckle. I'm not at home often, so I can't see them more than a few times. Besides, the environment of the headquarters is different from here. No matter how much they are modified, it's hard to keep them alive. The few fish you gave me last time died in less than half a year. I feel sorry for them. Lin Buzheng smiled and threw a cigar to Lin Fengting. His action was relatively casual. Where do you plan to go after solving things here? Lin Fengting took the cigar and slowly cut it open, lit it, took a deep breath, and then said with a smile, in fact, there is no place to go. After so many years, there are obviously some places that I haven't been to, but I always feel that I have been to them all. I'm old, and my ability to accept new things is getting worse and worse. Now I'd rather go to some places where I have left good memories than places that I haven't been to. He sucked on the cigar and said softly, when things here are over, go to Zhongzhou State, or stay in Tiannan for a while. Xianyuan City is very beautiful. If you have time, I recommend you to have a look. Okay, I've heard a lot about the new emperor in the dark world. Call me when you go there. Let's go together. Lin Buzheng laughed. Well, you have a lot of industries and are very rich. Xianyuan City and Emperor Dong's palace have just developed, and you have a lot of places to cooperate. Just right. Not you, wait a minute. Lin Buzheng looked at Lin Fengting with a strange expression. Did you misunderstand something, or do you think too highly of me? Emperor Dong's palace, why do you say that it's a new force that has just risen without any foundation? In everyone's eyes, the Flourishing Age Fund is a big deal. If I can cooperate with such a behemoth, even if there are benefits, it should be me who benefits. Lin Fengting was in a trance and didn't speak for a long time. Of course, he knew that the Flourishing Age Fund had merged with Emperor Dong's palace. But in his heart, he couldn't confuse the Flourishing Age Fund with Emperor Dong's palace. Perhaps only a real outsider could clearly see how terrifying Emperor Dong's palace was now. Lin Fengting laughed at himself and said softly, that's true. The news has come. Lin Fengting chuckled and said, His Majesty East Emperor defeated Jiang Shangyu. It turned out to be Jiang Shangyu. Tut. The dark world is really full of talents. The new generation excels the old. Can you still sit on your position as the top expert in the dark world? Bullsh *T, top expert. Lin Fengting scolded with a smile. In the smoke, he shook his head and said, I should be no match for Tianlan now. I'm not afraid of Jiang Shangyu. Really? Lin Buzheng asked subconsciously. Well, I saw the video. Jiang Shangyu's means are a little strange, but his attack power is not strong at this level. There's nothing to worry about. Lin Fengting said lightly. Lin Bujing took a serious look at him and nodded slightly. His heart also calmed down. The reason why the Jiang family of South America attacked him was very simple. They wanted to keep Lin Fengting firmly in America during the final battle in Beihai. Jiang Guochu must have Jiang Shangyu's will behind it. Lin Fengting's words did make him feel a lot more at ease. It was clear that the two did not intend to sleep tonight. They chatted casually, and time passed slowly as they chatted. Among the various branches of the Lin clan all over the world, the number of times the Lin clan in America asked for help from the headquarters was the fewest, except for the European branch. The annual dividends given to the headquarters were also the most, except for the European branch. Their relationship with Lin Fengting was also the best except for the European branch. The two chatted casually and waited for news from all over the dark world. They did not feel bored. It was 3:00 in the middle of the night in Drenvia time. Lin Bujing's cell phone suddenly vibrated. He picked up the cell phone and looked at the message on it. He was silent for a long time without speaking. What's wrong? Lin Fengting was a little curious. It's the news from the Dark Knights. Lin Bujing took a deep breath and handed the cell phone to Lin Fengting. 5,000 soldiers of the Snowdance Corps parachuted into the headquarters of the Dark Knights. In the second hour and 40 minutes, nearly 1,200 experts from the joint forces in Northern Europe raided the Dark Knights. The two sides met head-on. The corner of Lin Fengting's mouth twitched. The predecessor of the Snowdance Corps was the Thunderbolt Battalion of the Border Control Corps of Zhongzhou State. It was the Thunderbolt Battalion that directly belonged to Dongqing Wudi, the god of massacre. In Zhongzhou State, the Border Control Corps was the most elite force in Zhongzhou State. It had the most terrifying combat capability, the most combat experience, and the strongest battlefield consciousness. And the Thunderbolt Battalion was the strongest force in the Border Control Corps, second to none. Even in the whole world, the Thunderbolt Battalion could be said to be the strongest. The 5,000 Snowdance Corps was equivalent to 5,000 former Thunderbolt Battalion fighting against the joint forces. The 1,200 people of the Snowdance Corps. Even a fool could imagine what the result would be. Lin Bujing's voice was low, with a touch of palpitation and trembling. In 25 minutes, 1,200 people from the joint forces were annihilated, including the Holy Zone No. 2 of the half-step Invincible Realm and the secondary executioner of the Jiang family, 2 experts of the half-step Invincible Realm. No one could escape. After this battle, the joint forces in Northern Europe were almost wiped out. How about the Holy Zone? Lin Fengting was not surprised by the result and asked calmly. If 50 Thunderbolt Battalion fought against the same number of elites of the Dark World, the result might be unpredictable. But if the number was increased again, 500 Thunderbolt Battalion would fight against 500 elites of the Dark World, and the situation would be completely different. When this number was increased by 10 times, 5,000 versus 5,000, the 5,000 Thunderbolt troops were enough to easily crush everything. If the 5,000 Snowdance Corps that appeared in the headquarters of the Dark Knights went completely crazy and didn't care about casualties, not to mention the few people of the joint forces, they could fight against everything under the peak of the Invincible Realm. The enemy's army was annihilated in 25 minutes. This should be the result of them trying to reduce casualties. The Holy Zone. Lin Bujing took the phone, glanced at it, and shook his head. There's no news yet. It should be a stalemate. After all, it's the Holy Zone. Lin Fengting nodded. His eyes seemed to pass through the night sky and look in the direction of Beihai. The final battle in Beihai, he muttered to himself and shook his head slightly. How is this the final battle in Beihai? It's a big reshuffle in the Dark World. The pattern of the whole Dark World is going to be different. Time makes the hero. For His Majesty Dong Huang, tonight may be the best opportunity. The new dynasty is right in front of us. Lin Fengting pondered and didn't speak. The sound of hurried footsteps came from afar and got closer and closer. A housekeeper in his 50s trotted into the pavilion. Patriarch, Mr. Lin. What's the matter? Lin Bujing's eyes flashed. There are 2 guests outside the door. They said they wanted to meet you and Mr. Lin. The housekeeper's voice was extremely solemn. What guests? Lin Fengting was a little confused. He hadn't been in America for a long time, but there had been waves of guests who wanted to see him. Everyone wanted to have a relationship with the headquarters of the Lin clan, because once they succeeded, it meant that they had a relationship with the countless branches of the Lin clan all over the world. Therefore, in the past few days, no matter what their relationship with Lin Bujing was, many big shots in America came here to visit, but Lin Fengting didn't see any of them. The housekeeper clearly knew his rules, but he still came to report at this time. Was the identity of the people who came this time extraordinary? It's His Excellency Fredel and His Excellency Sekiro. The housekeeper said softly. Lin Fengting was stunned, and his eyes were thoughtful. The names are a little familiar. It's not as simple as a little familiar. Lin Bujing's eyes flickered slightly. Fredel is the current leader of the Men in Black, and Sekiro currently controls most of the power of the Heroes Club. These two people are very important in the dark world of America. Lin Fengting narrowed his eyes and looked at Lin Bujing meaningfully. Lin Bujing lowered his head slightly and smiled without saying a word. The Men in Black was the special warfare center of Star State, and its status was similar to Kunlun City in Zhongzhou State. Of course, it was not the current Kunlun City, but the former Kunlun City. But the specific structure was more complicated than Kunlun City because of the participation of many wealthy families and consortiums. But no matter how complicated it was, one thing was undeniable: they had always been the official organization of the special warfare system of Star State. In the chaos of Snow Country, Cass Rotter, the god of war of Star State, who was close to the peak of the invincible realm, died, and the murderous weapon fell into Li Tianlan's hands. Not only Cass Rotter, but also Chaos, the leader of the fantasy world, Charlemagne, the president of the Heroes Club, and Jiang Qiansong, the patriarch of the Jiang family of South America, all died in the chaos of Snow Country. Chaos of the fantasy world, Cass Rotter of the Men in Black, Charlemagne of the Heroes Club, and Jiang Qiansong of the Jiang family of South America. In the whole of America, these four people were the peak of America's combat power. With their deaths, the dark forces in America were a little leaderless. After the chaos in Snow Country, Jiang Guochu broke through to the invincible realm as quickly as possible, and then began to attack the other three forces. Under pressure, the forces of the Men in Black and the fantasy world began to integrate, and the Heroes Club and some other forces gradually united to fight against the annexation of the Jiang family of South America. In the current situation in America, except for the Jiang family, the Men in Black and the Heroes Club could be said to be the two strongest dark forces. The gap between them and the Jiang family was that they temporarily lacked the combat power of the invincible realm. Now Jiang Guochu, an invincible realm expert, was not in the headquarters. But the leaders of the Men in Black and the Heroes Club came to the door. What were they going to do? Lin Fengting silently picked up the teacup, lowered his head, and took a sip of tea. It's good to meet them, he said slowly, in a light voice. Without asking for Lin Bujing's opinion, the butler turned around and walked out quickly. It was quiet in the pavilion. The two brothers drank tea in silence, and for a while, no one spoke. In less than 5 minutes, footsteps were heard again. The butler led the way in front and led the guests into the pavilion. There was no need for an introduction at all. At the front, a relatively short and effeminate young man, who looked about 30 years old, had already bowed slightly to Lin Fengting and said softly, "Hello, Your Highness, I'm Fredel." His voice was a little shrill, and when he was serious, it sounded very neutral. Next to Fredel was a tall middle-aged man. He also bowed respectfully and said in a deep voice, "Your Highness, I'm Sekiro." "Sit down, please." Lin Fengting smiled softly, pushed the cigar box in front of the two, and even poured a cup of tea for them himself. He was so easygoing that he didn't put on any airs at all. The two took the teacups with both hands, sat upright, and looked a little reserved. Sekiro was a famous expert for a long time. In Charlemagne's time, he was already one of the core higher-ups of the Heroes Club. After Charlemagne died more than 2 years ago, Sekiro almost used all his means to make further progress on the basis of the half-step invincible realm. Although he didn't break through to the invincible realm, he barely had the combat capability of the invincible realm. This was also the reason why he could reunite the Heroes Club, which was in a state of disunity and internal strife. Fredel, on the other hand, was a new expert in America. He was 35 years old, and 2 years ago in Star State, he was only at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. In the past 2 years, he had advanced by leaps and bounds, and now he was a top half-step invincible realm expert. His age was enough to make people look forward to him. If he didn't take a detour, according to his progress in the past 2 years, he could basically enter the invincible realm before he was 40 years old. He had the support of Star State, and his position among the men in black was much more stable than Sekiro's in the Heroes Club. He was also more aggressive in doing things. However, in front of Lin Fengting, a super expert who had surpassed the peak of the invincible realm, no matter what their personalities were, they had completely restrained themselves. They actually looked a little obedient. Lin Fengting looked at them quietly, then suddenly smiled and said, "You two must be busy people. If you have something to say, just say it. To be honest, I don't think there's anything I can help you with." His tone was calm, but his attitude was obvious. Fredel and Sekiro looked at each other. Fredel coughed and said softly, "In fact, we're not here to ask for Mr. Lin's help. We've always admired the Lin clan. The men in black, the fantasy world, the Heroes Club, and even Star State, were very willing to be friends with the Lin clan. We heard that Mr. Lin is here, so after discussion, we decided to visit. This is out of respect for the Lin clan, and also for Mr. Lin and martial arts. It's our luck to meet a strong expert like you." The corner of Lin Fengting's mouth twitched slightly. He looked at Fredel's feminine face. He was a bootlicker, and he was an inexperienced bootlicker. He didn't follow the procedure, but just bootlicker. Lin Fengting didn't know how to answer him. "To show our sincerity, we're willing to seek justice for the Lin clan's branch in America," Sekiro said in a deep voice. Lin Fengting wasn't surprised at all. He said with a chuckle, "How? Jiang Guochu hasn't been in America during this time. After he entered the invincible realm, he's been very overbearing, which has caused a lot of dissatisfaction. In fact, the fantasy world, the men in black, the Heroes Club, and some other forces in America have joined forces with us. The Jiang family has hurt the interests of the Lin clan and ours. So tonight, all the forces that we've united will launch a surprise attack on the headquarters of the Jiang family of South America. We have absolute confidence that we can turn the headquarters of the Jiang family of South America into ruins. That's great courage." Lin Fengting couldn't hear any emotion in his voice as he praised. Fredel was a little nervous. "Mr. Lin, if you allow us to do it, we'll start now. I'm not a policeman." Lin Fengting couldn't help laughing. "All I want to protect is the Lin clan. You can do whatever you want as long as you don't target the Lin clan. I can't see anything, and it has nothing to do with me. If we can get some support from the Lin clan, even a little," Sekiro, who was a little irritable, said subconsciously. "Ahem," Fredel coughed and interrupted him. He subconsciously glanced at Lin Buzheng, who had been silent all this while. "Stop acting. I'm tired of watching." Lin Fengting waved his hand helplessly. Lin Buzheng smiled bitterly and said in a low voice, "I invited them here." Lin Fengting said, It's hard to say who joined forces with whom. We all have the same predicament and face the same difficulties. Fengting, you can't always be in South America. But my Lin family can't run away. This time, we've withstood the Jiang family of South America, and the Jiang family of South America will still be a threat to us. There's also a super expert beyond the peak of the invincible realm behind the enemy. If he stands up for the Jiang family and fights with you, there will be too many variables. So you want to completely destroy the Jiang family of South America while Jiang Guochu is away? Lin Fengting asked. Yes. In fact, we're not only preparing to attack the headquarters of the Jiang family of South America. The Men in Black, the Heroes Club, and other forces have exchanged information. We have the addresses of more than 30 secret bases of the Jiang family of South America all over America. And we've been preparing for a long time. With a simple order, all the bases we control, including the headquarters of the Jiang family of South America, will be attacked by us. I'm sure that after tonight, even if the Jiang family of South America doesn't completely perish, their strength will be severely weakened. At least for a few decades, the Jiang family of South America will no longer be a threat. Lin Buzhen glanced at Fredel and Sekiro. In fact, they don't want you to participate. This is my request. There's a super expert beyond the peak of the invincible realm behind the Jiang family of South America, but the current Men in Black and the Heroes Club don't. I don't need you to participate in the battle against the Jiang family of South America tonight, but I need you to be a witness for me as the patriarch of the Lin clan. After the raid on the Jiang family of South America tonight, the Men in Black and the Heroes Club must not infringe on the interests of the Lin clan, and the Lin clan will not infringe on the interests of the Men in Black and the Heroes Club. Lin Buzhen's expression was serious and serious. The headquarters of the Lin clan stood aloof from worldly affairs. If it was just a branch of the Lin clan in America, Lin Buzhen's comprehensive strength was worse than that of the Men in Black and the Heroes Club. After the Jiang family was destroyed, it was impossible for Lin Buzhen to swallow a large number of interests. Suddenly, he had to spit out a large part, which belonged to the Men in Black and the Heroes Club. They could swallow the interests that Lin Buzhen couldn't swallow, and they could even swallow Lin Buzhen's share. So for the sake of his own situation, Lin Buzhen needed Lin Fengting to be the notary. He wasn't scheming against him. This was the duty of the patriarch of the Lin clan. The headquarters of the Lin clan didn't enter the secular world. But under the witness of the patriarch of the Lin clan, all the contents of tonight's cooperation must be carried out according to the agreement. The Men in Black and the Heroes Club could attack each other afterward, but once they wanted to encroach on more interests to target the Lin clan, it was tantamount to destroying Lin Fengting's authority. Lin Fengting could naturally attack the Men in Black or the Heroes Club. This was the biggest deterrent. And because the Lin clan didn't enter the secular world, this was the safest guarantee. The Lin clan had always had a good reputation in this regard, and Lin Fengting had been the notary many times. It had been proven that as long as they didn't target the Lin clan afterward and weren't too greedy, the Lin clan was indeed a group of people who weren't aggressive. Lin Fengting tapped the table lightly. After a while, he suddenly laughed. I don't think I'm the best person to be the notary. Lin Buzhen was stunned. He looked at Lin Fengting and couldn't come back to his senses for a while. Lin Fengting didn't look at him. Instead, he looked at Fredel and Psycholo. If you two don't mind, I can recommend a new notary for you. He's not here, but I can replace him as the notary. If you have any disputes in the future, then it won't be me who will take action, but him. The two leaders of the Heroes Club and the Men in Black looked at each other. After a while, Fredel asked carefully, Your Highness, who are you talking about? Li Tianlan from Emperor Dong's palace. Lin Fengting smiled meaningfully. As soon as he finished speaking, Fredel and Psycholo's faces suddenly turned extremely ugly. Let Dong Wang be the notary. The same word popped up in Fredel's and Psycholo's minds at the same time. Inviting a wolf into the house. This was no different from inviting a wolf into the house. Lin Buzhen's eyes lit up slightly. Then, he fell silent. For Lin Buzhen, he could trust both Lin Fengting and Li Tianlan as the notary. But for the Men in Black and the Heroes Club, replacing Lin Fengting with Li Tianlan was completely different. Emperor Dong's palace didn't have the rule of staying out of the secular world. They were at the stage of development. If the notary was changed, Emperor Dong's palace would directly extend its reach to America. At that time, it wouldn't be Lin Buzhen who would worry about their interests being damaged, but the Men in Black and the Heroes Club. Fredel opened his mouth, feeling a little awkward. Don't be in a hurry to refuse. Lin Fengting's gaze was still profound, with an indescribable meaning. He lowered his head to look at the time on his watch and said slowly, there's still time. The two of you can think about it carefully. Tell me if you want Dongwang to be the notary or not. I don't mean to threaten you. I just think that for your current situation, Dongwang is more suitable than me. The dark world is very lively tonight. Lin Fengting said softly. From now, no, from a few hours ago, the dark world has begun to reshuffle. You too, don't you really want to think about it? Fredel and Sekiro's bodies shook at the same time. The Holy Land was under attack. They were planning to attack the Jiang family. Several Invincible Realm experts were involved in the final battle of Beihai. This incomparably bloody reshuffle was destined to not have an outcome that everyone could accept. In the fierce game, some people were destined to leave the field in disgrace, and some people were destined to reach the real peak. What about the men in black? Then, what about the Heroes Club? Fredel was silent for a long time. He picked up the cigar, took a deep puff, and puffed out a thick cloud of smoke. I agree to change the notary. His voice was very low. But it's not His Majesty Dongwang. Lin Fengting raised his eyebrows slightly. Then who? Qin Weibai. Fredel said softly, I want her to be the notary this time. Qin Weibai. The new patriarch of the Lin clan, and also Li Tianlan's favorite woman. Lin Fengting glanced at Lin Buzheng. I have no objection. Lin Buzheng said with a smile. Lin Fengting also smiled. His smile was a little complicated, with a touch of faint mockery. He looked at Fredel and said softly, You're really a smart man. Chapter 991. As the pilot of Li Tianlan's journey from Ningzhou to Qingdao, and from Qingdao to Chushui's city of Beihai, Lu Junchang never expected to receive such a grand welcome ceremony as soon as he landed. To be exact, the welcome ceremony had begun before he and Li Tianlan landed. Fireworks filled the sky. Intense fire kept blooming in the air, almost occupying all his vision. All kinds of weapons with great destructive power flew and exploded in the air, and all the weapons landed on the plane he and Li Tianlan were on. The cannonballs tore the clouds and kept blooming with a huge impact in the sky. The violent vibration made the plane tremble constantly. Li Tianlan remained calm. A large amount of sword intent kept surging in him and enveloped the whole plane in the sky. The constantly converging sword intent spread rapidly and formed a sword energy halo with a range of hundreds of meters in an instant. A large number of artillery fire kept exploding within the halo. The plane began to dive. Lu Junchang, who was completely focused, controlled the plane and said in a deep voice, Your Majesty, someone leaked the information. It's not a secret. Li Tianlan maintained the sword energy halo, and his body shook slightly in his seat. At his level of martial arts, he was not afraid of most conventional thermal weapons. But the cannonballs that kept exploding in the air were too dense. Endless artillery fire bombarded the sword energy halo, and Li Tianlan could clearly feel the pain in his body gradually deepening. His combat capability could surpass the peak of the Invincible Realm. But his physical strength was only at the peak of the half-step Invincible Realm. Dongshan is the territory of the Prince Group after all. Lu Junchang thought of the big shot who stood at the peak of Zhongzhou State but was now destined to have a life-and-death relationship with Li Tianlan. His face was gloomy. What he did was tantamount to betrayal. It doesn't matter. Li Tianlan interrupted him. He doesn't have much time to waste. Lu Junchang was shocked and stopped thinking about it. He controlled the balance of the plane and dived toward the ground. The overwhelming artillery fire smashed over crazily. Lu Junchang used to be a veteran of the Border Control Corps and the Thunderbolt Battalion. He had seen many big scenes, but he had never seen such an exaggerated battle as the one in front of him. The plane appeared in Choshui City. No matter how delicate the relationship between Beihai and Zhongzhou State was now, no matter how crazy Chen Fangqing was now, with Li watching there, he dared not and could not fire on Li Tianlan's car. Such intense firepower could not have come from Zhongzhou State. Where else could it have come from? East Island. It could only be East Island. How ridiculous and ironic was the reality. Everyone knew that with Li Tianlan's current realm, no matter how dense the gunfire was, it was impossible to shoot down his plane. It was impossible to hurt Li Tianlan at all. At most, it would consume his physical strength to maintain the sword chi halo. To put it bluntly, at the beginning of the final battle in Beihai, in order to consume Li Tianlan's physical strength and weaken his state, Chen Fangqing actually reached some kind of tacit understanding with East Island? What was this? What was this? Commander Lu gritted his teeth. The plane spun in the air and suddenly accelerated, diving towards the ground. The signal transmitted from the control tower was as clear as ever. With a dull sound, the plane abruptly landed on the runway of Chushui Airport following the signal and began to taxi forward. No need to land, Li Tianlan suddenly said. His fingers casually tapped the interior of the plane twice. The majestic sword energy quickly surged out with the tapping of his fingers. The sword energy halo around the plane began to shrink, but it was countless times more condensed. In half an hour, you're safe. Go back, Li Tianlan said calmly. The sword energy halo that was condensed to the extreme had shrunk to a range of 200 meters, but it was countless times stronger than before. In half an hour, the plane was enough to leave the airspace of Beihai and even enter the inland of Zhongzhou State. Nothing could threaten this plane. Your Majesty, Commander Lu hesitated for a moment. It's okay. Li Tianlan smiled. After dawn, the plane from Beihai will send me back. It's too dangerous for you to stay here, and it's meaningless. Commander Lu was silent. His strength was actually not weak in the dark world, but he, who had just entered the thunder-shocking realm, was really nothing in the final battle in Beihai. Moreover, before Li Tianlan came to Beihai, he had already withdrawn the force department of Emperor Dong's palace in Beihai. He came alone with a sword. Naturally, he wouldn't let Commander Lu of the giant group stay and fight with him. The gunfire became fiercer as the plane descended, and it was almost crazy. Li Tianlan knew very well that the road ahead of him was not easy to walk. Below them was the small military airport of Chushui City. This place was too special, or in other words, too remote. The airport was built on the outskirts of Chushui City. Within 50 kilometers, there were no buildings or residents. It was already the middle of the night, and no one would come to the wilderness where there was only a military base. From the perspective of East Island, the elites of Beihai and the base were all enemies, not innocent civilians. Li Tianlan was the key to the final battle in Beihai. If he landed here, East Island, which had a tacit understanding with Chen Fangqing, couldn't be indifferent. After all, Chushui City was only dozens of kilometers away from East Island in the strait, and they had too many weapons to target Li Tianlan. 5 minutes ago, when the plane flew over the sea, Li Tianlan saw countless warships flying the flags of Jifeng Sword Reigning School and Wuji Palace. Yes, they were the warships of Jifeng Sword Reigning School and Wuji Palace. At least on the surface, those warships, fighters, and submarines were all weapons of Jifeng Sword Reigning School and Wuji Palace. This was a conflict in the dark world, and strictly speaking, it had nothing to do with East Island. This might be very bullshit, but it was a necessary thing to do. From the military airport to the downtown of Chushui City, it was dozens of kilometers away. Under the situation where countless weapons were covetously watching him, one could imagine what he was going to face. Even for Li Tianlan, it was not easy for him to walk over unscathed. Let's go, Li Tianlan said softly. You can only go back for the rest of the way. I don't have much energy to take care of you. Lu Junchang smiled bitterly. He knew that he couldn't play a role in this final battle. He turned his head slightly and was about to say something, but he suddenly froze. A ray of sword energy visible to the naked eye hovered slightly where Li Tianlan had been. And Li Tianlan's figure had disappeared without a trace. Lu Junchang gritted his teeth. The fighter plane that was diving to the ground suddenly drew an arc in the air, quickly rose into the air, and turned around. The sword energy halo around the fighter plane shone brightly in the night sky. The gunfire all over the sky suddenly paused for a moment. The next second, countless weapons in the distance seemed to have noticed something at the same time, and changed the target at once. Boom! The deafening roar came from afar in an instant. Light. Endless light burned the night sky, as if the stars were falling all over the sky. The light fell on the ground in pieces. The automatic weapon terminals of the base in Shushui City started to fight back at the same time, but the firepower of their base was so small compared with the gunfire all over the sky. The overwhelming light was almost half of the firepower of the whole East Island. Crazy, determined, at all costs. The defense system of the base was completely destroyed in the first place. The huge base was almost completely destroyed in a few seconds. The explosion ignited the gunpowder warehouse of the base, and the ground kept cracking in the violent shaking. Thick smoke and fire rose into the sky, and the base that existed a moment ago became a ruin in an instant. Li Tianlan's figure flashed out of the ruins, and he looked at the direction of East Island with cold eyes. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He quickly reached out his hand to wipe the blood, and gritted his teeth. After tonight, he would go to East Island and ask for an explanation for what happened tonight in person. His figure gradually became illusory in the roar of the gunfire all over the sky, more and more illusory, and finally seemed to become a shadow. The crazy artillery fire, regardless of the cost, locked on Li Tianlan relentlessly. In the dark night, he seemed to be the only light. No matter where he was, the sky would be illuminated by endless gunfire. Anti-aircraft guns to kill mosquitoes? The scene in front of him was that countless anti-aircraft guns were madly firing at a mosquito. Mountains, woods, farms, wherever Li Tianlan went, everything in his way was destroyed by the artillery fire in a few seconds. The violent shock wave continued to spread behind him, tearing everything on the road to pieces. At the same time, Li Tianlan bled from head to toe. The second strike is ready. In the battle hall full of sci-fi feeling, the huge screen was divided into countless small screens, and the most important screen was the picture of Li Tianlan being bombarded by countless gunfire. A female high-level official of Wuji Palace looked at the screen, and then lowered her head to glance at the screen of the electronic instrument in her hand. She said calmly, according to the strict analysis of the AI, before Li Tianlan arrives in Shushui City, we can carry out 4 rounds of gunfire coverage. The probability of killing Li Tianlan is 0.7%, seriously injuring Li Tianlan is 12%, and there is a 70% probability of causing moderate injury to Li Tianlan, which will greatly weaken his physical strength. This action is effective, and it perfectly meets the expectation. Opposite the female high-level official, a middle-aged man who had just joined Wuji Palace for less than 3 days squinted at the screen. After a while, he sneered, "Invincible?" Heh. The female high-level official didn't say anything. Although the man joined Wuji Palace for a very short time, his position was completely above her. His martial strength wasn't outstanding, and he was only in the fire-flaming realm. But he was the supreme commander of the aircraft carrier under his feet. This was the only aircraft carrier in East Island. Nearby, the 2 fleets, the aircraft carrier itself, and the fleet waiting on the deck of the aircraft carrier were all the subordinates of the middle-aged man. Since he joined Wuji Palace, it was self-evident what East Island wanted to do. At all costs, increase the firepower output and try to seriously injure Li Tianlan. The middle-aged man sneered and said, "I'd like to see what a seriously injured heavenly son can do. In addition, send the fleet into Beihai to hunt down Li Tianlan." Got it. The petite female high-level official nodded and looked at the small instrument in her hand. The first air formation has set off and is expected to enter in 2 minutes. Huh. When she exclaimed, Li Tianlan was still dodging in panic in the gunfire all over the sky. The middle-aged man had taken a step forward and pressed the button to launch the weapon in his hand. The button was pressed. His body suddenly stiffened on the spot. It seemed that he couldn't believe it and couldn't react for a while. After about 10 seconds, when the first wave of firepower was about to end, he finally roared, "What's going on?" Report. The female high-level official's face was a little pale. Our air formation didn't enter Chushui City. They turned around, and in that direction. Are they going to Zhongzhou State? Report. The weapons system of the giant whale is malfunctioning. The power system of the giant whale is malfunctioning. The navigation system is malfunctioning. Report. Report. The air formation has taken off. We have lost the authority of the fleet. The pilot of the fleet is asking for support. The Black Dragon fleet has lost control. My God, what are they doing? The Black Dragon fleet has opened fire. They have opened fire on the ferocious bird fleet. The ferocious bird fleet is rushing to the giant whale. Why is this happening? Without any warning, countless nightmarish pieces of bad news broke out in a few seconds at a speed that caught everyone off guard. The middle-aged man listened to the bad news dumbfoundedly and didn't even have time to roar in anger. He only felt very cold. From head to toe, he felt cold. This situation could only mean one thing. The most advanced hackers used the most advanced means to completely invade the systems of the giant whale and the other two fleets in the shortest time, and seized control of them with great force. How short was this time? Probably only 3 to 5 seconds. It sounded like it was acceptable. But in fact, it was extremely strange and could even be called a supernatural event. But as the only aircraft carrier of East Island, the intelligent brain system of the giant whale was protected by the core database of East Island. If they wanted to take control of the giant whale, it meant that they had to break into the core database that East Island checked and maintained almost all the time. What was in the core database? Not only the control authority of the giant whale, but also countless top secrets of East Island. No, not countless. All of them. All of the confidential technology, intelligence, information, plans, and core database could be found. This was the core database that East Island spent years and countless resources to build. Theoretically, no one could break into it. The intelligence of the database was antivirus all the time. Even if it encountered an irresistible intrusion, the database could disconnect from the network within 5 seconds. But now, all the facts proved that the core database of East Island was useless in front of the intruder. It was directly invaded within 5 seconds, and it couldn't even disconnect from the network. This not only meant that the control of the giant whale had become a toy in the hands of the intruder. It also meant that the entire network of East Island had become a toy in the hands of the intruder. How the hell was this possible? What kind of hacker team was this? Did Emperor Dong's palace gather all the top hackers in the world to invade together? But even if they could do it, they shouldn't have the ability to do it. The middle-aged man's body suddenly trembled violently. Anger and fear rose in his heart at the same time. He roared desperately, "Who? Who is it?" The screen made a buzzing sound. Li Tianlan and all the small screens on the screen disappeared. Snowflakes flashed on the screen. A chubby, harmless-looking face appeared on the screen. The fat man was holding a big bottle of water and gulping it down, as if he was relieving his seasickness. "It's me. Hello, everyone." With a smile, the fat man held the water bottle in one hand and waved the other in front of the screen. "Who are you?" The middle-aged man's voice was hoarse, and there was fear in his eyes. "I'm your ancestor." Fatty smiled and said, "You guys dare to attack my big brother?" After a pause, he thought of the vocabulary that he had just learned and thought was very fashionable. "Are you kidding me?" Chapter 992. The gunfire all over the sky stopped without any sign. Li Tianlan, whose body seemed to be completely transparent, passed through a jungle. The sound of the violent explosion and the heat wave were still spreading behind him. But the sky in front of him suddenly lost all the fire and became a deep and quiet night again. It suddenly turned from extremely lively to absolutely quiet. His ears were buzzing. Li Tianlan frowned tightly and suppressed his inner discomfort. He squinted and looked around vigilantly. The night sky seemed to be completely quiet. There was no sound of cannonballs piercing through the air in the distance. All the attacks seemed to stop within a second. What was going on? Did East Island give up? Or was the firepower not enough? All kinds of funny guesses flashed through his mind. Li Tianlan stood where he was for a while cautiously. The expected attack still didn't come. Li Tianlan's mouth twitched. In that short period of time, the sky was really covered with overwhelming gunfire. The continuous explosions broke out around him without a pause. That level of firepower had completely surpassed a fully organized heavy armor corps of Zhongzhou State. Li Tianlan didn't know how big the enemy's fleet was. But under the cover of that level of firepower, no matter how high his combat capability was, with his current physical strength, he was at risk of being seriously injured at any time. Li Tianlan had made up his mind to pay some price to increase his speed. As long as he was close to Chushui City, he would fight on the sea from Chushui City first. He would first dismantle the so-called fleet of East Island and then talk about other things. But now, the endless attacks had suddenly disappeared. Loud thunder but little action? Strong start but weak finish? Li Tianlan stood where he was for about a cigarette's time, but the attack still didn't come. He was a little shocked, but he didn't hesitate anymore. In the quiet night, his figure moved forward quickly, rushing in the direction of Chushui City. The phone suddenly rang. Li Tianlan, who was like an illusory shadow in the night, stopped for a while. He took out his phone and looked at it. It turned out to be Qin Weibai's number. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly. Qin Weibai knew what he was doing and how critical the situation tonight would be. If there was nothing serious, he wouldn't call. But what could happen in the current Emperor Dong's palace? He pressed the answer button and said, Tianlan, are you okay? Qin Weibai's voice sounded a little hurried. Everyone had a clear answer in their hearts as to which one was stronger, the ultimate modern firepower or the ultimate individual force. Even if Li Tianlan really became the heavenly sun, it was impossible for him to withstand the endless bombardment of artillery fire. If Li Tianlan was seriously injured by the firepower as soon as he got off the plane, the whole situation would undoubtedly become more variable. I'm fine. Li Tianlan smiled and said, just now, the fleet of Wuji Palace on the sea attacked me. The power was terrible, but the duration was short. I don't know what happened inside. Anyway, I haven't been attacked and I'm on my way to Chushui City. This is good news. Qin Weibai said in a strange tone, and then she said quickly, I need to communicate with President Li Huacheng and Speaker Bai. Now 4 air formations of East Island are approaching Liaodong province, but it's not a war. We control the fleet and air fleet of East Island. At present, everything is under our control. I need Speaker Bai to vacate a military base and a deep-sea dock. The giant whale of East Island is approaching Liaodong, and there are also 2 fleets and 40 carrier-based fighter jets. These are all our trophies. Li Tianlan's brain buzzed, and his whole body froze in place for a moment. Trophies? Trophies of Emperor Dong's palace? There was so much information in this sentence that Li Tianlan couldn't react for a moment. No matter how rich Li Tianlan was now, he couldn't stay calm in the face of these so-called trophies. How terrifying was the cost of an aircraft carrier? East Island's aircraft carrier came from Star State. After more than 3 years of long negotiations, they finally ordered such a big treasure from Star State, and the cost was as high as 12 billion star dollars. And aircraft carriers never existed alone. The places where aircraft carriers appeared were equipped with the most elite fleets of East Island, including cruisers, destroyers, submarines, frigates, and everything else. Every warship was East Island's painstaking efforts, plus the aircraft carrier fleet. From another perspective, Qin Weibai's words meant that 2 fleets and an aircraft carrier fleet became the trophies of Emperor Dong's palace. The money and meaning behind it made even Li Tianlan feel a little dizzy. What's going on? Li Tianlan held the phone, and his voice suddenly became a little dry. This power was almost equal to the sea power of the Wang family of Beihai. They might not be comparable in terms of the total size of the fleet, but Emperor Dong's palace now had the most important core force of the navy, the aircraft carrier. After hundreds of years of development, Beihai only had one aircraft carrier now. This big gift made Li Tianlan dizzy, and he even thought he was dreaming. To be honest, I don't know. Qin Weibai's voice was also a little confused. At night, as soon as I left, two people came in. They looked like a pair of master and servant. The master called himself Xianyuan Wushang, and the servant was Xing Tian. They wanted to join Emperor Dong's palace. Xianyuan Wushang claimed to be an excellent doctor and hacker, but he refused to join the lab of Emperor Dong's palace, so I sent him to East Island as a battlefield doctor. They should be arriving soon. So far, I'm not sure if his medical skills are excellent, but his hacking skills are top-notch. You mean? Li Tianlan subconsciously rubbed his forehead. This new doctor hacked into the database of East Island, and got the control rights of the giant whale and the other two fleets? Qin Weibai was silent for a while. She understood the confusion in Li Tianlan's tone. The giant whale was the core of the sea power of East Island, and it was very troublesome to change the control rights, even for the internal operation of East Island. Its importance was self-evident. If the so-called hacker could hack into and get the control rights of the weapons system of East Island at will, the world would have been ruled by hackers. Hackers could do a lot of things, but there were even more things they couldn't do. If he could hack into the core area of a country at will, did it mean that he could make East Island explode on the spot? If he could hack into East Island, could he hack into Zhongzhou State and Star State? Could he hack into Zhongzhou State and Star State at the same time? If he could do it, did it mean that he could directly start the Third World War at any time, or even cause the real end of the world? The whole world was under his control, and everyone's life and death were in his hands. He could do whatever he wanted. It was totally impossible. In fact, even if there was a situation of hacking in the battle, it was mostly a tug-of-war. Hackers could play a role, but they couldn't decide the overall situation. Even if their own network was completely taken over by hackers, they could still disconnect the network and use the local network to command, or even manually deliver orders. Playing a country in the palm of one's hand with the so-called advanced technology? Not to mention those soldiers, if there was such a person. How about Li Tianlan? What was the point of Tianlan's so-called martial arts? If that so-called doctor could really be so powerful, when he fought with Li Tianlan couldn't even find where the doctor was before he was directly beaten by the weapon controlled by the doctor. It's really incredible. Qin Weibai said softly, but it's the truth. The current situation is a bit chaotic. Tianlan, this Xianyuan Wushang is not simple. He once unintentionally called his mother Queen Mother. If there is no special reason, there will naturally be a father if there is a Queen Mother. It's still hard to tell where he came from, but there must be a superior behind him. Who can be so superior? If such a person really exists, why did he join Emperor Dong's palace? He took everything we have now, just like that. Qin Weibai's tone was a bit strange. On the contrary, he should have a favor to ask. He said that his father asked him to get along with me, so he called me sister-in-law and said that I was his big brother. Anyway, I didn't see any malice from him. Li Tianlan didn't speak for a long time. Malice? This was the first time they met. No, they hadn't F*King met yet, but 3 fleets including the aircraft carrier were sent over. If this was the malice of the other party, Li Tianlan really hoped that there would be more malice like this. This was his first meeting gift? So big? Wasn't it a bit exaggerated? Li Tianlan was silent for a while and asked, "Is he in East Island?" "Not yet, but it should be soon." Li Tianlan thought about it and nodded. "I see. The thing in Beihai will end tonight, and I will go to East Island to find him." Qin Weibai said yes, these fleets. "I will contact the president and the minister. There is no sea area near Tiannan, so we can't use these fleets for the time being. But if East Island really can't take away their command, then we won't give them up." These fleets can temporarily hang the flag of the Border Control Corps as the sea power of the Border Control Corps. To say the least, we can hang the flag of the Arctic Ocean Corps or the Snowdance Corps. Li Tianlan said slowly. Then East Island. Qin Weibai's tone was a bit strange. East Island? Li Tianlan sneered. What does this have to do with East Island? When I flew over the sea just now, I saw these fleets hang the flag of Wuji Palace. Now this is a small conflict between Wuji Palace and the Dark World. If we take away some small weapons of Wuji Palace, will East Island have the nerve to come here and ask for them? Qin Weibai smiled and didn't say anything. Li Tianlan held his phone. In the quiet environment where there was no more attack, his figure flashed again in the night. What else did Xianyuan Wushang say? When I arranged for him to take the plane, he said that his seasickness hadn't been relieved yet, so he didn't want to get on the plane. I think he just didn't want to go to East Island. And there is no sea area near Tiannan, so where can he get a ship to get seasick? Besides, he said that his ancestry is from the Central Plains. I have sent someone to check it out, but there is no news yet. Oh, by the way, he seems to be very persistent about a word. Huh? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. What word? Order. Qin Weibai said softly, he said I have the shadow of order. Order? Li Tianlan said softly, what does that mean? I don't know. Qin Weibai's voice was soft. He said order is omnipotent, omniscient, and everywhere. Chapter 993. As the commander-in-chief of the giant whale fleet, Kudo Jun had spent most of his life on the sea. He was good at wisdom, especially at sea battles. In the changeable and complex ocean environment, he could quickly find and create opportunities. Once, in the internal sea maneuver of East Island, he had created a classic record of severely damaging 3 enemy fleets with the power of 1 fleet. That record had been nearly 10 years ago, and it was still being analyzed and simulated as a teaching material in the military academies of East Island. Kudo Jun was a real expert in sea battles and the top commander. That was why he could become the commander of the giant whale and the giant whale fleet. He had encountered all kinds of situations on the sea, and for today's decisive battle in Beihai, he had made a lot of preparations in advance. In the half a year before the fleet was activated, he had imagined all kinds of scenarios and discussed the solutions in detail with his subordinates. One after another, the so-called hopeless situations that his subordinates thought were impossible were brought up by him, and then slowly found a solution. It was no exaggeration to say that all of Kudo Jun's work in the past 6 months was for today. The senior officials of the giant whale fleet had analyzed how to enter Beihai with irresistible force under the huge advantage, take over half of Beihai, and achieve the expected combat goal. They had different solutions under different advantageous situations. Similarly, the senior officials of the giant whale fleet had also analyzed countless situations that were not in their favor. For example, the Wang family of Beihai had a sea power that had not been exposed yet, or the sea power of Zhongzhou State suddenly intervened in the battle, or something else. There was no such thing as a conventional situation in a battle. Anything that happened could be considered a special situation. And Miyamoto Jun had a way to deal with every special situation. But he had never thought that the current situation would be so special. It was so special that as the commander-in-chief of the giant whale fleet, he had directly and completely lost his command. His giant whale used to be his weapon in the sea, but now it had become his prison. When analyzing countless possible situations, in the most extreme case, Miyamoto Jun had imagined that the loyal soldiers and even the senior officials of the giant whale would betray him. Even so, he could still take back the command. But now, they didn't betray him. What if the ship betrayed him? This was completely impossible, but it happened right now. Miyamoto Jun didn't know what was going on. He didn't know who was in control of the fleet, and he didn't even know where he was. The 3 fleets shifted their direction on the surface of the sea, retracted their weapons, and quickly left the designated battlefield. Miyamoto Jun's face turned red from extreme anger as he roared, fix the communication system immediately. I want to talk to the Senate. Yes, we are doing our best, but it will take some time. A large number of technicians were scattered throughout the giant whale, trying to regain control of the ship. The technical supervisor was typing furiously on the computer in the main control room, cold sweat dripping down his forehead. Miyamoto Jun's expression changed. He gritted his teeth and rushed out of the main control room with his phone. The entire North Sea had become a huge battlefield. Intense battles erupted in every city other than the Xingzhou region. The attack that the Allied forces had been preparing for a long time now carried with it an explosive power. For a short period of time, they were completely unstoppable. The North Sea Legion's encampment, the 7 major sword-bearing families, the city hall, all the important places were attacked at almost the same time. Close combat, entanglement, resistance, counterattack. The elites of the North Sea and the Allied forces were engaged in a frenzied battle. It seemed that no one would be able to win this battle in a short time. No wonder it's North Sea. Jiang Shangyu, who had arrived in Kanglan City 10 minutes ago, sat quietly on the sofa and looked at the screen in front of him. He praised with a gentle smile, in this situation, they still have this level of combat capability. It's not hard to imagine what will happen to us after we push the front line to the Xingzhou region. The images on the huge screen kept changing. The specific images of various cities and local battlefields kept flashing on the huge screen. So far, the Wang family of Beihai has dispatched 10 experts above the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, but they haven't encountered the devil troop yet. Half an hour ago, a 50-man all-heavens troop appeared in Queen City. Moraid reported calmly, summarizing the news that was constantly coming from all directions. As experts of the invincible realm, as the high-end combat capability of the Allied forces, they couldn't waste their energy to fight with the conventional forces of North Sea. Countless forces gathered in North Sea. Now they could mobilize more than 30,000 people. 30,000 elites. This number might not be comparable to the North Sea Corps, but the main force of the North Sea Corps was also restrained by East Island. The only thing the 30,000 people scattered around North Sea needed to do at this time was to try their best to kill the conventional forces of North Sea and force Mount Dibbing to keep using its trump card. The Internal Security Force, All Heavens Troop, the Devil Troop, and so on. When the Wang family of Beihai's trump card was almost exhausted, it would be the time for several invincible realm experts to climb Mount Dibbing to fight it out. Not enough. Jiang Shangyu said calmly, wait a little longer. He took the remote control and controlled the switching frequency of the screen. The huge screen was instantly completely occupied by the fire and explosions all over the sky. In the earth-shattering firepower, an almost completely illusory figure struggled to walk through the gunfire all over the sky, looking extremely embarrassed. Everyone was staring at this scene. Li Tianlan. Jiang Shangyu could be said to be the strongest combat capability on their side. Li Tianlan, who had defeated Jiang Shangyu not long ago, had undoubtedly become a key figure who could affect the balance and even the outcome in their eyes. Can you contact the giant whale fleet? Jiang Shangyu suddenly said. Yes. Tianhai Wuji, the Grandmaster of East Island who had been silent most of the time, nodded. He looked at Jiang Shangyu and asked, what's your request? Giant whale, black dragon, savage bird. The firepower of these 3 fleets on other areas can be reduced a little. Jiang Shangyu pointed at the figure on the screen who was embarrassed but not dangerous in the gunfire. At all costs, it's best to seriously injure him. All the firepower of the 3 fleets can be concentrated on him. Tianhai Wuji was stunned for a moment. He took a deep look at Jiang Shangyu, nodded, and dialed the number. The phone was quickly connected. A small screen appeared on the huge screen. The figure of Miyamoto Jun, the commander-in-chief of the giant whale, appeared in front of everyone. This middle-aged man from East Island with a serious expression didn't look at the other invincible realm experts at all. He just saluted Tianhai Wuji and said, Your Highness. How far is Li Tianlan from Choshui City? About 20 kilometers. Miyamoto Jun replied, we can still carry out 2 rounds of firepower coverage in this time. Adjust the plan. Tianhai Wuji said in a deep voice, your 3 fleets don't have to care about other battlefields. All the firepower is concentrated on Li Tianlan. You must make his injury worse. Okay. Miyamoto Jun nodded and hung up the communication. Okay. Tianhai Wuji said. Jiang Shangyu nodded. He looked at Chushui City on the screen, watched Li Tianlan walk through the gunfire, and couldn't help laughing. On the screen, Chushui City was full of gunfire. But in reality, Chushui City was quiet. Sporadic battles broke out in all directions of the city. When the battlefield in Chushui City was about to end, Li Tianlan finally came to Lingtai Mountain. Chapter 994. I hope you understand and keep in mind that Beihai belongs to the sea area of Zhongzhou State. Your warship entered the sea area of Zhongzhou State rashly and even used weapons. Zhongzhou State needs a clear explanation. Do you want a war? On the screen, the dignified and solemn middle-aged man's somewhat intense voice rang out clearly in the conference room. Everyone felt a heavy pressure. Matsumoto Ichiro looked at the face on the screen quietly and kept silent for a long time. He was the military spokesman of East Island. They were now in the highest-level war conference room of East Island. In the spacious conference room, the 4 walls were completely covered with screens, and all kinds of scanning, detection, communication, and control systems were there. At this moment, in the sight of the people in the war room, East Island's satellite status was normal. On the screen, in the ongoing final battle in Beihai, all the forces of East Island were moving toward the predetermined location in an orderly manner. The 3 fleets of Giant Whale, Black Dragon, and Vicious Bird were bombarding Li Tianlan on the surface of Beihai. The other 2 fleets, codenamed Sailor and White Shark, joined Jifeng Sword Training School and were trying to approach Kanglan City from another direction. Everything was under East Island's control. All the large transport planes of East Island had gathered in different places. When the Giant Whale killed Li Tianlan, or forced him to retreat, Li Tianlan would not be able to escape. When the 2 fleets of Sailor and White Shark landed in Kanglan City. When the battle in Chushui, Tongtian, and Kanglan City was over, countless transport planes in East Island would take off as soon as possible. An army of nearly 100,000 people would land in Beihai within 2 hours and firmly occupy Chushui, Tongtian, and Kanglan City. The joint force would cross the Kanglan River to Xingzhou, and East Island would firmly control half of Beihai. The land that belonged to East Island hundreds of years ago was about to return. Everyone in the war room was very excited. They had long been prepared to face the pressure from Zhongzhou State, but Qin Fangqing had reached a certain degree of tacit understanding with them. When the final battle in Beihai was over, as long as they could win, Qin Fangqing could go further. At that time, Li Huaqing would step down, and Qin Fangqing would acquiesce in the northern part of Beihai province occupied by East Island and completely control the southern part of Beihai at the cost of it. So at this time, facing the questioning from the other side of the screen, Matsumoto Ichiro didn't panic. But when he saw the face of the middle-aged man, his heart sank subconsciously. The East Island fleet entered the sea area of Zhongzhou State and opened fire. Zhongzhou State would definitely hold them accountable. It would be abnormal if they turned a blind eye to everything. Matsumoto Ichiro had originally thought that it would be some high-ranking officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Qin Fangqing had strong control in this aspect. Both parties would deal with each other and wrangle, and the matter would pass for the time being. But on the other side of the screen, the diplomatic spokesman of Zhongzhou State whom Matsumoto Ichiro wanted to see did appear, but he appeared behind the middle-aged man on the screen. Matsumoto Ichiro was also very familiar with the middle-aged man facing the camera. Ma Chao, the spokesman of Zhongzhou State's military. He was Dongqing Wudi's confidant. Internationally, especially in the subcontinent, many countries had a characteristic. They used to not be afraid of dealing with the government of Zhongzhou State, but they were especially afraid of Dongqing Wudi. This was especially evident in some countries bordering Zhongzhou State, such as Heng State and Annan State. And when Dongxing Wudi went further from the Border Control Corps and became the leader of Zhongzhou State, this performance was even more obvious. Because it meant that Dongxing Wudi could order not only the Border Control Corps, but also countless armies and all kinds of military services in the entire Zhongzhou State. Dongxing Wudi was known as the god of massacre of Zhongzhou State. In the face of enemies, he could never have a good temper. If you dare to mess with me, I'll *CKU, whoever I want. And the appearance of Ma Chao at this time undoubtedly represented the will of Dongxing Wudi. Dongxing Wudi might even be off the screen at this time. I don't quite understand what you mean. Matsumoto Ichiro took a deep breath and said cautiously, but I'll start an investigation right away. Investigation? Ma Chao's eyes were sharp, and he asked him politely, what are you investigating? Don't you know where your warships are now? Here's the thing. Matsumoto Ichiro smiled. About 10 days ago, we eliminated some older warships and sold them to Wuji Palace and Jifeng Sword Raining School at a low price. I think I know what's going on. General, the warships you mentioned should belong to Wuji Palace and Jifeng Sword Raining School. They have nothing to do with the East Island officials. I heard that Wuji Palace and Jifeng Sword Raining School don't get along well with the Wang family of Beihai. It seems to be a conflict in the dark world. We can intervene, but it won't make much difference. It's not appropriate for us to intervene in such a thing. The muscle on the corner of Ma Chao's mouth twitched obviously. You said that you sold all those warships to Wuji Palace and Jifeng Sword Raining School? Including the giant whale, they have nothing to do with the East Island officials? He asked in a hoarse voice. Yes. Matsumoto Ichiro nodded. All this is the personal behavior of Wuji Palace and Jifeng Sword Raining School. It has nothing to do with East Island. 3 hours. Ma Chao took a deep look at Matsumoto Ichiro. I want to see your attitude in 3 hours. He said no more and hung up the phone directly. Matsumoto Ichiro looked at the dark screen and sneered. 3 hours? 3 hours was enough for their transport troops to parachute into the northern part of Beihai. Attitude? So what if I show you my attitude then? Matsumoto Ichiro turned around slowly and said calmly, how are the fleets doing? Everything is normal. The answer came quickly. Matsumoto Ichiro touched the broken beard on the corner of his mouth and nodded with satisfaction. On the other side of the screen, after hanging up the phone, Ma Chao also smiled with satisfaction. Behind him, where the camera couldn't reach, Dongxing Wudi and Li Huaqing sat face to face, looking at each other. These silly birds. Ma Chao laughed. They're so silly that they're kind of cute. That is to say, Dongxing Wudi shook his head in disbelief. Until now, no one in East Island has found out that the giant whale and the other 2 fleets have actually left the battlefield and started to approach Zhongzhou State. Obviously, they don't know anything. Ma Chao nodded with a smile. In the picture they're seeing now, the giant whale should still be attacking His Majesty. Emperor Dong's palace has edited the video of the giant whale suppressing His Majesty countless times and played it to them in different speeds. Even the communication between the 2 sides is completely simulated by Emperor Dong's palace. In this case, East Island, the giant whale, and the Allied forces are completely out of touch. They're like blind people. They'll receive whatever message we want to send them. As for whether it's true or not, they won't doubt it at all. East Island has just made it clear that giant whale, black dragon, and fierce bird have nothing to do with them. They said they sold these eliminated things to Wuji Palace and Jifeng Sword Raining School at a low price. In this case, we don't need to be polite. 3 hours is enough for us to take over this batch of trophies. Even if East Island finds something by then, it'll be meaningless. I just caught a cold, and then I caught a cold again. I feel terrible. I'll write less these days, and more in a few days. Chapter 995. La 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 la. The helicopter flew past in the night, and the intermittent humming echoed in the cabin. Xianyuan Wushang was studying the pieces of data that only he could see on the lenses of his glasses, and his other hand was still holding his big bottle of purified water. He looked so bored that he was like a salted fish that had lost all his dreams. La 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 la, gulp, the moment he stopped humming, he picked up the big bottle of purified water in his hand, raised his head, and gulped it down. The bottle of purified water, which he had drunk from Tiannan to East Island, gradually bottomed out with a gulp. Xianyuan Wushang sighed, shook the empty bottle, and said gloomily, "Water is the source of life. How can we do without water?" Xing Tian's huge body sat in another corner of the cabin, listening to his young master's sigh. He rummaged in his backpack, found another bottle of water, and handed it to Xianyuan Wushang with both hands. "Oh. Another bottle?" Xianyuan Wushang's eyes lit up. He took the water bottle, unscrewed it, and tapped his glasses with the other hand. A lot of data on the lenses combined and became a new virtual intelligence. The intelligence connected the communication in East Island. Xianyuan Wushang listened to the communication, shook his head, and drank some water. La 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 la, young master. Xing Tian's thunderous voice suddenly rang out. Ah. Xianyuan Wushang looked at him blankly. Are we going to participate in the final battle in Beihai? Xing Tian asked in a low voice. I'm a doctor, and you're a big fool. How can we participate in this kind of thing? Xianyuan Wushang looked at him strangely. No, no. I just want to give my big brother a gift. It just so happens that the gift that my second sister gave me can come in handy. I'll do it. As for the other things, what else do you want to do? There was no pause in the flow of data on the lens. All kinds of data combined with each other and turned into virtual intelligences, which were placed on the network nodes in East Island, which looked calm but was actually riddled with holes. Xianyuan Wushang hummed a song and watched all this with relish. The intensity of the battlefield seemed to be escalating as time went by. The internal communication frequency of East Island was getting higher and higher, and the number of virtual intelligences made up of a large amount of data was also increasing, occupying every communication signal. During the quietest time in the entire East Island, the most horrible and weird things happened. East Island, Fleet, Beihai. 3 directions, countless small battlefields, countless command rooms, countless commanders, and frontline combatants. At this moment, no one noticed anything amiss. They all thought that their communications were unimpeded and that they could communicate with anyone. But from the beginning to the end, they did not communicate with anyone. Everyone was facing different artificial intelligences. Using the simplest distance as the unit of measurement, the virtual intelligences completely isolated East Island. 10 kilometers away, no one knew what their so-called own people were doing. La 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 la. The fat man watched all this silently. His eyes changed from relish to boredom, and then to numbness and dullness. The song he hummed was also intermittent. Young master. Xing Tian couldn't stand it anymore and called him again. Ah. The fat man answered blankly. Xing Tian hesitated again and again. He just reminded him not to participate in the final battle of Beihai was not what he wanted to do. He just wanted to find a topic to interrupt his young master's humming. This voice was really, it sounds awful. Xing Tian finally said it, and he suddenly felt refreshed. The fat man's humming suddenly stopped. He slowly turned his head and looked at Xing Tian seriously. You said my singing is awful? Do you know? Yes, I know. Xing Tian nodded quickly. You're a very famous prince of music, but in fact, those people are just flattering you. Those women just want to please you. As for those of the same sex, they also want to get close to you so that it's convenient for them to pursue your sisters. I never lie. It sounds awful. This is my truest comment. Xianyuan Wushang was silent for a while. He lowered his head and started to search his body, murmuring, "Where's the saber? Where's my saber?" Xing Tian took a step back in silence. Before Xianyuan Wushang really found the saber, he quietly shrank in the corner. I'm telling you, it's me, Xianyuan Wushang was rambling. In the middle of his words, the communication screen in the cabin suddenly lit up. Qin Weibai's figure appeared on the screen. She looked at Xianyuan Wushang and slightly raised her eyebrows. What are you doing? Nothing. We're about to arrive at our destination. I'm a little nervous. Xianyuan Wushang scratched his head, looking completely harmless on his chubby face. Qin Weibai didn't care and said calmly, now tell me, what's going on? How did you get into the core database of East Island in a short time? Xianyuan Wushang subconsciously narrowed his eyes. I've informed Tianlan about this, and he's also very interested in it. To be honest, we welcome you to join Emperor Dong's palace. But there are some things that we have to understand. You should know that what you did today is beyond the scope of a hacker. You can easily hack into a country's core database. This kind of ability, no hacker in the dark world can do it. Qin Weibai said calmly. Sister-in-law, you're worried that I'll get into the core database of Emperor Dong's palace at any time, right? Xianyuan Wushang suddenly asked. Compared with Emperor Dong's palace, Zhongzhou State has more reasons to worry. Qin Weibai took a deep look at Xianyuan Wushang. What you did has a great impact. Zhongzhou State is now also waiting for Emperor Dong's palace to give them an explanation. After a pause, Qin Weibai continued, no matter what explanation. Xianyuan Wushang was silent for a while and laughed. I see. So, Qin Weibai looked at him. How on earth did you hack into the core database of East Island? It's not an invasion. Xianyuan Wushang shook his head. I just upgraded the core database of East Island. In a short period of time when the system is upgraded, the calculation logic of the database system will have some errors. I also took this opportunity to get the control authority of the 3 fleets. In a way, I didn't hack into the secret database of East Island, but in a way similar to deception. During the time when the database system was upgraded, I got the control authority and fused the fake data with the secret database. In this case, in a short period of time, I mean before the database system of East Island is completely upgraded, the data I control means that I have the highest authority in East Island. Qin Weibai was speechless. She didn't understand what Xianyuan Wushang was talking about. Yeah. But she understood the last sentence. Before the system of East Island was upgraded, Xianyuan Wushang had the highest authority in East Island. Not only the 3 fleets, not only the communication network, but all the authority. Qin Weibai took a deep breath and said softly, the operation of Nightmare Core in East Island? Sister-in-law, don't worry. I'll cooperate. Xianyuan Wushang nodded honestly, his smile extremely simple and honest. Emperor Dong's palace will explain this to Zhongzhou State, but, the intrusion technology, it's not my technology. Xianyuan Wushang shook his head. I'm a doctor. As for the virtual intrusion, it's this thing. He reached out his hand and pointed at the glasses on the bridge of his nose. This is a gift from my second sister. Although it looks like a pair of glasses, there's a microchip inside, and there's a small program written by her. I don't understand it very well, but if I understand it, I can regard it as a one-time consumable. This time, it's almost used up, and I won't be able to use it in the future. So I'll completely become a mediocre hacker and the top doctor. He sighed softly, and his chubby face looked a little helpless. You mean, the glasses are equivalent to a computer? Even a mainframe computer? Qin Weibai was a little curious. That's right. But only I can start it, and it needs authority. After a pause, he smiled. It was a very complicated smile, with self-mockery, yearning, and something else. In this world, what doesn't need authority? Qin Weibai glanced at him thoughtfully. Is it a doctor, and your second sister is a hacker? Yes, a hacker. Xianyuan Wushang's tone was a little awkward. How many siblings do you have? At this moment, Qin Weibai felt like she was a household checker. But the fat man in front of her was obviously not simple, and he seemed unwilling to say anything, so she could only dig bit by bit. A lot, Xianyuan Wushang was a little helpless. My father is, ahem. Anyway, I have a lot of siblings. Are they all like you? Qin Weibai's eyes were a little strange. Not the same. Xianyuan Wushang shook his head. I should be regarded as an anomaly. Most of my family are relatively serious. I mean, in terms of character. Well, they're very serious, very serious. Are they all doctors or hackers? Their families are very interesting. Qin Weibai smiled. I'm a doctor, and my second sister is a hacker. I have a few brothers. They are all martial artists, very powerful ones. How powerful? Qin Weibai narrowed her eyes slightly. No one noticed that her eyes were getting deeper and deeper. Xianyuan Wushang hesitated. How does the most powerful brother compare with Tianlan? Qin Weibai suddenly asked. Xianyuan Wushang was stunned. Xing Tianxia raised his head subconsciously and looked at Qin Weibai. The look in his eyes was a little strange. Compared with brother Tianlan, Xianyuan Wushang murmured to himself. He suddenly covered his face and closed his eyes. My brothers, he covered his face and said vaguely, they can't compare with brother Tianlan. No, they're far behind, far behind. Chapter 996. As the headquarters of the Huangfu family, one of the 7 major sword-holding families, at the beginning of the final battle, Lingtai Mountain could be said to be the most intense place in Qiushui City. As early as half a year ago or even earlier, the important figures of the major sword-holding families had left Beihai under Wang Xingxiao's tough order. The so-called important figures referred to the young people who could maintain business, connections, intelligence, and control the family order, as well as the promising young people who hadn't realized their potential yet. Most of the important combat forces of the sword-holding family stayed. This couldn't be considered a rule, but it could be considered a tradition. In hundreds of years of history, the Wang family of Beihai had never preserved its strength and force. It was the case in Mount Dibing and the sword-holding families. The core combat forces they cultivated were used for fighting. It was a worthy death, an honor, and also their own responsibility and belief. So when nearly 1,000 elites from Jifeng Sword Training School and Wuji Palace went directly to Lingtai Mountain, they encountered the fiercest and most resolute counterattack of the Huangfu family. The battle spread from the top of the mountain to the foot. Blood flowed like a river. When the distant sky was covered by endless artillery fire, the sky above Lingtai Mountain was completely covered by countless flickering blue electric arcs. The fierce battle that lasted for several hours had come to an end. There were still sounds of fighting in some corners of Lingtai Mountain. Li Tianlan stood at the foot of the burning Lingtai Mountain, looking at the mountain in front of him that used to be known as the mountain with the most spiritual qi in southern Beihai, and remained silent. In just a few hours, Lingtai Mountain had become a ruined scene. The fire that had been burning until now had burned the once lush forest into ashes. Corpses were scattered on the mountain, including those of Jifeng Sword Training School and Wuji Palace, as well as those of the Huangfu clan. In the fierce battle, electric arcs and thunderbolts erupted from the power of the thunder-shocking realm crisscrossed on the mountain. The extremely smooth road was twisted and broken, full of potholes. The exquisitely shaped stone forest was in ruins. Flowers, dead leaves, and blood were stuck together and everywhere. Li Tianlan came here 2 years ago. In his memory, the scenery of Lingtai Mountain was beautiful. But at this time, Lingtai Mountain was completely destroyed in just a few hours of fighting. It was a mess and looked extremely ugly. Li Tianlan breathed softly. His figure kept flashing at the foot of the mountain, all the way forward. There were obviously more elites of East Island on the mountainside. The battle up and down the mountain was almost over. The elites of the Huangfu family began to break out of the encirclement. East Island sent some people to hunt them down from the foot of the mountain all the way to the downtown. Most of the elites occupied the peak of the Ling Tai mountain and began to dig and search in teams, trying to find some hidden spots of the Huangfu clan. Although the important figures of the Huangfu family weren't here and most of the important things had been moved, there were still some things that couldn't be taken away by a family that had existed for hundreds of years. When Li Tianlan crossed the mountainside and came to the top of the mountain, the elites of East Island had just blown up a secret laboratory belonging to the Huangfu family on Lingtai Mountain. A large number of elites rushed in at the same time. One piece of equipment after another was moved out and gathered together. The carpet-style search continued. Everything that could be taken away was arranged in a large open space. As for the things that couldn't be taken away or that were of little value, such as houses, they were all blown up and furniture was all burned. Occasionally, there were seriously wounded people of the Huangfu family who were dying on the battlefield. Without any hesitation, the elites of East Island went up and killed them all. Li Tianlan's eyes grew colder and colder. He really didn't like Beihai. But the scene in front of him reminded him all the time that this was the territory of Zhongzhou State and these people in front of him all belonged to East Island. The anger and coldness in the bottom of his heart stirred his emotions little by little. Just because this was the territory of Zhongzhou State. And Li Tianlan had always regarded Zhongzhou State as his own Zhongzhou State. It could be called patriotism or pure possessiveness. No matter what the reason was, when Li Tianlan saw this scene, he would always recall a history that he didn't experience but was firmly recorded in the books. Burn, kill, and rob. Zhongzhou State was the most powerful country in the world today. If he didn't see it with his own eyes, who could believe that someone could do such a thing in the territory of Zhongzhou State? Li Tianlan walked slowly with no expression on his face. The fire was still burning all over the mountains and plains. The fire distorted the light. His figure was illusory like a shadow that didn't exist, so he didn't attract anyone's attention. The elites of East Island were still busy. Li Tianlan said nothing and went straight to the direction of the Huangfu family's ancestral hall. All the spirit tablets in the ancestral hall had been moved in advance. A middle-aged man with a mustache squinted his eyes and stood in the center of the ancestral hall, quietly looking at the long sword inserted in the ancestral hall. This is the biggest gain of our trip. Muttering to himself, he looked at the long sword in front of him with some fanaticism in his eyes, and suddenly said, "When can our equipment be sent here?" "Soon, young master. I've talked to Kojima on the phone a few minutes ago. They will arrive at Lingtai Mountain in about 20 minutes. A skinny middle-aged woman took a step forward and said respectfully. 20 minutes, the middle-aged man hesitated and nodded. Confirm Li Tianlan's current situation. I just talked to the ferocious bird fleet on the phone a minute ago. They are trying their best to suppress Li Tianlan. He is likely to be seriously injured. He can't be here within an hour." The woman's voice was flat. "Very good." The middle-aged man laughed. He touched the mustache around his lips and said softly, "If Uncle can get Tianguang's sword, he can definitely enter the peak of the invincible realm faster. In today's dark world, there is no one at the peak of the invincible realm. If Uncle can go further, our Jifeng sword raining school can definitely become one of the strongest superpowers in the whole dark world." He stared at the sword in front of him. "I will definitely bring it back to East Island. This is an important opportunity for us to rise." Yagyu Wuji. He was Yagyu Kurumi's nephew and the future heir of Jifeng sword raining school. His martial arts level was average, but he was one of the most famous researchers in the whole East Island. This time, he personally led the team to Chushui City, and he was determined to get the Tianguang sword that Li Tianlan inserted here 2 years ago. "So, you not only want to rob the resources of Beihai, but also my weapon?" A faintly discernible voice suddenly rang out. It was incomparably illusory, yet incomparably cold. "Who gave you the guts?" Chapter 997. The illusory voice kept echoing in the ancestral hall, and the whole hall was filled with killing intent the moment the voice sounded. Lusheng Wuji suddenly turned around, and his face changed dramatically. There was more than one emperor in the dark world today. Jiang Shangyu called himself His Majesty. The old man in the Holy Land whose mental strength had reached the transcendent realm was also His Majesty. But there was only one person in the whole dark world who called himself His Majesty after Wang Tianzong. Dong Huang Li Tianlan. But how was it possible? The air in his sight shook and twisted slightly, and a vague, almost invisible shadow was outlined in front of the ancestral hall. When he became real from the illusory, the Tianguang's sword in the ground began to tremble violently. The sharp and clear sound of the sword rushed out of the ancestral hall and almost resounded throughout the top of Lingtai Mountain. Lu Xingwuji's face was pale, and his eyes were full of horror and disbelief. He subconsciously reached out his finger to point at Li Tianlan, and then put his hand down instinctively. How are you going to take away my weapon? Li Tianlan looked at him and asked. Lu Xingwuji shook his head in confusion. 2 minutes ago, he had just observed the situation in the suburban base of Chushui City through his mobile phone. Li Tianlan was struggling in the endless artillery fire, and he seemed to have been seriously injured. No one would doubt that. Li Tianlan was not the chosen one yet. Even if he really stepped into that supreme realm, what could he do? 3 large fleets, countless heavy artillery, and a dense group of aircrafts. Even if Li Tianlan was a heavenly son, he had to run away when this kind of artillery fire, which could easily destroy a large city, came over. It was not surprising that Li Tianlan was seriously injured under that level of firepower. But Li Tianlan, who was vomiting blood and struggling in the mobile phone video 2 minutes ago, now appeared intact on Lingtai Mountain. They were both in the suburbs of Chushui City. But they were in 2 completely different directions. How was that possible? At this moment, he did not answer Li Tianlan's question. Instead, he subconsciously took out his mobile phone and quickly dialed. Li Tianlan watched all this silently and narrowed his eyes. The call was quickly connected. Lu Xingwuji's body trembled. When facing his own people, all the fear in his heart turned into extreme anger, which seemed to be a characteristic of this ethnic group. His eyes were red, and he roared at the top of his voice, "Report Li Tianlan's situation." Countless gunfire sounded faintly on the other end of the phone. At the same time, a calm and steady voice sounded, "Li Tianlan has been seriously injured. Everything is under control." Willow Everlasting Life's arms trembled, his face drained of all color. He was very familiar with this voice. This was the voice of Jifeng Sword Raining School's chief guest, Tianyu. He was a chief visiting professor who was extremely loyal to the Jifeng Sword Raining School and even a little crazy. It was impossible for him to betray the Jifeng Sword Raining School. What did this mean? In the winter of Choshui City, Yagyu Kurumi was so cold that he almost suffocated. This meant that at least in Tianyu's view, Li Tianlan was still under the attack of countless cannons. Then who was Li Tianlan in front of him? This could also mean that the person he was talking to wasn't Tianyu at all. He had long since lost contact with her. Then who was Tianyu on the other end of the phone? You don't want to say? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and asked again, "How are you going to take this sword away?" Yagyu Wuji's body suddenly shook. He wanted to show his toughness, but the sword energy everywhere in the ancestral hall was densely surrounding him, and the sharp edge almost aimed at every pore on his body. In extreme fear and suffering, his will completely collapsed in a second. East Island, no, Jifeng Sword Raining School has always had a proven theory. This theory comes from my father, Yagyu Kurumi. The so-called sword energy and the domain, as well as the destructive power of any martial arts expert, can actually be regarded as a special magnetic field. I brought a lot of equipment this time, which can interfere with or even completely suppress the magnetic field to the greatest extent, which is equivalent to suppressing Tianguang's sword energy. This is also our chance to take it away. Your Majesty. My uncle is Yagyu Kurumi, and I'm the heir of Jifeng Sword Raining School. We don't mean to take away your weapon, but my uncle hopes to observe Tianguang's sword intent and enter the peak of the invincible realm. No matter if he succeeds or fails, we will return Tianguang to its original owner and send it to Emperor Dong's palace, so. Magnetic field, Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth. Yes, it's the magnetic field. I can completely give the theory we studied to Emperor Dong's palace. Right now, Yagyu Wuji said hurriedly. Li Tianlan had lost interest in listening to him. The dense sword energy slowly penetrated Yagyu Wuji's body and seeped in from every pore on his body. Blood spurted out, and the extremely twisted screams sounded crazily in the ancestral hall. The ubiquitous sword energy flowed slowly. Everyone in the ancestral hall was smashed into powder in the surging sword energy. Li Tianlan stood expressionlessly. Extremely dense sword chi gushed out of the ancestral hall and enveloped the entire peak of the Lingtai mountain like water. Then, it shone brightly and the overwhelming sword chi flowed unscrupulously. The sword chi interweaved and formed a light screen. The huge light curtain completely covered Lingtai mountain, and then slowly disappeared. The world was quiet. The sound outside the ancestral hall disappeared. The sound on the top of the mountain disappeared. The sound on the mountainside disappeared. There were no corpses, not even blood. The sword energy flowed all the way, and all the East Island elites on Mount Dibbing completely disappeared and evaporated. Only Li Tianlan stood in the ancestral hall alone, slowly reaching out his palm to Tianguang. The body of Tianguang's sword kept shaking, vaguely conveying a very obvious emotion of joy. Li Tianlan crooked his finger. Whoosh! Tianguang's sword suddenly rushed out of the ground and rushed to Li Tianlan. The black trench coat completely opened at this moment, covering Tianguang's sword. The trench coat danced in the air, with a harsh sound of metal rubbing. Li Tianlan slowly turned around and walked out of the ancestral hall. He scoffed at Yagyu Wuji's theory of magnetic field. It was not because Yagyu Wuji was wrong. It was just that this was nothing new in his eyes. In the past 2 years, the Wang family of Beihai had also used the device to suppress the magnetic field to pull out the divine weapon he left in Beihai, but it had not succeeded so far. Li Tianlan had inserted the divine weapons in the 13-story tower and the 7 sword-holding families and Mount Dibbing in Beihai. Of course, it was not meaningless. The 7 sword-holding families and Mount Dibbing could be said to be the place with the richest vitality in the whole Beihai. Mysteriously, it was the place with the richest luck. The divine weapon could not absorb the vitality, but it could speed up the energy storage in this vitality. After 2 years, Li Tianlan came to Beihai again. The divine weapons were combined into one. Xianyuan Feng, who had become complete again, was destined to be more terrifying than before because of the addition of several murderous weapons. Now, if Xianyuan Feng had enough energy, Wang Tianzong had little chance to survive another eternal sword above Mormon's. The flying black trench coat slowly quieted down. Li Tianlan pinched the cuff, felt the remaining energy of Xianyuan Feng, and narrowed his eyes. On the quiet Lingtai mountain, his figure slowly rose into the air. The black trench coat danced in the cold wind. Li Tianlan's figure rushed directly to the north, driven by ruthlessness. The Lingtai mountain was the starting point. A rainbow-colored sword light streaked across the sky in an instant, shooting toward the north at an incredible speed. The night was either quiet or gorgeous. The rainbow crossed the sky unscrupulously and was extremely dazzling in the night. From Chushui to Tongtian, it passed by Kanglan, Queen City, Floating Island City, Liuli City, Shenzhou City. Under the night sky, the rainbow across the whole Beihai flew farther and farther, getting brighter and brighter. A rainbow across the whole province. It was like the most shining miracle of this era. Chapter 998. Kanglan City was filled with snow and wind. Starting from Kanglan City, all the way north to Xingzhou, more than half of the North Sea province was covered in snow. The chaos in the city had come to an end. But the slaughter continued. The entire North Sea province's communications had been paralyzed for less than an hour. Those who weren't directly involved simply couldn't imagine what had happened in this city. Kanglan was the center of Beihai. After years of reasonable development and superior geographical location, This city had become the most prosperous city in Beihai. Even in the north of Zhongzhou State, Kanglan could be said to be one of the most prosperous cities, surpassing Bin City and Qingdao. Whether in terms of environment or economy, it could be said to be second to none in the north of Zhongzhou State. The status of Huading in Zhongzhou State was basically the same as that of Kanglan in Beihai. More than a quarter of the population of North Sea was in Kanglan. Even though it was a snowy night, there were still people coming and going, and it was an endless stream. In tonight's decisive battle, this was also the city that the United Forces valued the most. The geographical location of Kanglan was excellent. It could attack and defend. It had a large population and a prosperous city. It could easily cause great chaos, cause a huge impact, and weaken the strength of Beihai. Before officially setting foot on Mount Dibing, it could be said to be the headquarters of the joint forces. All the Invincible Realm experts were here. This was also the first city to have its communications blocked. It was also the first city where the decisive battle in North Sea broke out. At the same time, it was also the most tragic battlefield. From the communication blocking to the Wang family of Beihai forcibly restoring the communication. 56 minutes. The sky was filled with snow, and the whole city was stained with blood. The Allied forces temporarily controlled Kanglan City's transportation network. Car accidents, rear-end collisions, and countless traffic accidents plunged the center of Kanglan City into a state of chaos and congestion in the shortest time possible. The policemen who were trying their best to maintain order were shot to death. Chaos continued to spread at the scene of the accident. The city government was attacked. Explosions roared in the city. The crowd was surging chaotically, trampling, pushing and shoving. In a situation where communication was completely blocked, be it the police or the army, their reactions were extremely slow. After more than 50 minutes of preparation, the chaos in the entire city had reached a point where it was almost out of control. The idea of conserving their strength and concentrating their strength was unrealistic in such a chaotic situation. There were 3 divisions of the Beihai army stationed in Kanglan, more than 10 special warfare organizations, special police, firefighting, explosion prevention. All the forces had no choice but to evacuate the citizens and re-establish order. The celebration of the Allied forces had begun. Fresh blood bloomed in every corner of the city along with the flying snow. No one would be stupid enough to attack civilians. However, the North Sea soldiers responsible for evacuating the civilians were the targets of the Allied forces. Assassination, sneak attack, siege. Death spread everywhere. All the manpower and material resources of the joint forces in Kanglan City were mobilized. Taking advantage of the sudden decisive battle without any warning, they seized the initiative and directly tore the entire Kanglan City into a mess before the Wang family of Beihai could react. 3 hours. When Jiang Shangyu returned to Kanglan from Tiannan, there were almost no pedestrians on the streets and alleys of Kanglan. Mount Dibing's martial law order covering the entire province was passed to every household in different ways. But in order to calm the chaos in Kanglan, within 3 hours, more than half of the middle and senior members of the 3 divisions of Kanglan were killed or injured. The order was completely out of control. The entire Kanglan almost completely fell into the hands of the joint forces in these 3 hours. Kanglan lost contact with Mount Dibing. They could not support Mount Dibing, and Mount Dibing could not support Kanglan. Without any hesitation, thousands of elites of the Allied forces rushed into the headquarters of the Jiang family in the center of Kanglan Lake. They pushed forward all the way, and the process was unexpectedly smooth. The Jiang family, known as loyal and brave, turned out to be the one with the least strength among all the sword-holding families. To be exact, there was almost no strength. How much strength did they have? The Allied forces did not even encounter any symbolic resistance and directly occupied the island in the center of Kanglan Lake. The control of the island changed hands. Under the guidance of Wang Xiaoyao, the Allied forces opened the monitoring system and command system of the Jiang family all over Kanglan City. All the people of the Allied forces in Kanglan City also became more efficient because of the Jiang family system, and the personnel deployment was more reasonable. Countless elites of the Allied forces were divided into countless teams under precise command, and quickly rushed to the key positions of Kanglan City one after another. In the shortest time, the entire Kanglan City seemed to have become their fortress. All the invincible realm experts of the Allied forces did not move. They did not go to the island in the center of the lake of the Jiang family. Instead, they had been in the conference room of the hotel next to Kanglan River, confirming the news from all sides through a large number of screens and complex communications. At present, we can be sure that Kanglan City is already under our control. In an hour at most, our soldiers can occupy all the strategic key positions in Kanglan City. With sufficient ammunition, food, and water, even if Mount Dibbing can mobilize the Beihai Corps, we can still hold on for a long time. Jiang Shanyu looked at the picture on the screen and suddenly said. As he spoke, he looked thoughtfully at Tianhai Wuji and Yagyu Kurumi. Wang Xiaoyao sat next to Jiang Shanyu and looked at the two grandmasters of the invincible realm from East Island with no expression. Our elites will come to Kanglan City within 4 hours. Wuji Palace and Jifeng Sword Training School have about 70,000 people, and they are all real elites. Tianhai Wuji's tone was much faster than before, and there was a touch of excitement in his eyes. Kanglan, Tongtian, and Qiushui. These three cities represented half of Beihai Province, which originally belonged to East Island hundreds of years ago. Now they occupied Kanglan City and faced the Queen City across the river. As long as Kanglan City was in their hands, they could use Kanglan City to slowly encroach on Tongtian Port and Qiushui City. These two cities were completely sandwiched between Kanglan City and East Island. Even Beihai couldn't make any big moves at that time. They couldn't take down Kanglan City in a short time, and it was impossible for their main force to bypass Kanglan City. Under the stalemate, in 10 years, 20 years, or even longer, East Island would have a chance to completely take back this land of more than 70,000 square kilometers. Tianhai Wuji glanced at Wang Xiaoyao, who was expressionless, and subconsciously turned his eyes to the screen beside him. A dazzling arc of colorful light flashed on the screen. The incomparably dazzling and resplendent seven-colored radiance was so dazzling in the snowy night sky. Tianhai Wuji's heart suddenly sank, and he subconsciously said, "What was that?" Everyone's attention was completely attracted by Tianhai Wuji. That rainbow was still hanging in the night sky on the screen, penetrating the wind and snow, extending toward the unknown distance. Jiang Shanyu's face suddenly became extremely ugly, and he was also a little shocked. Switch to the rear image. He suddenly stood up and said in a deep voice. The battle in Qiushui City was over. The Qin family in Tongtian Port was completely destroyed by Li Tianlan more than 2 years ago, and it hadn't recovered until now. Kanglan City was completely under their control. So from their point of view, Tongtian and Qiushui City behind Kanglan City were their rear. Li Tianlan might land in Qiushui City, but there were 3 fleets waiting for him. So more than 90% of the screens in the conference room were showing the battles of other cities in Beihai. Queen City, Floating Island City, Lioli City, everywhere was in the flames of war. Everyone ignored the rear until Tianhai Wuji reminded them. The screen quickly switched. In just a few seconds, all the screens turned black for a moment, and then lit up again. This time, most of the screens showed the rear image of Kanglan City. The conference room fell into a dead silence. Everyone in the conference room stood up subconsciously and stared at the screen. The colorful rainbow appeared on almost every screen. It was so bright, so dazzling. From Qiushui City to Tongtian. Just now, the rainbow flew over Kanglan City and directly entered Queen City. The dazzling rainbow extended all the way in the air, forming a long rainbow with a length of 10,000 meters and hundreds of thousands of meters. The sword energy was as majestic as the ocean, mighty and mighty. Jiang Shangyu's figure flickered and went directly to the window. Through the French window, he squinted and looked at the night sky in front of him. The snow was falling. The bright rainbow on the screen was in the night sky above his head. The rainbow in the snowy night was like a dream. But the mighty sword intent that seemed to be able to tear the world made everyone's scalp numb. Ruthlessness alone can't do this, and it's not necessary. Jiang Shangyu looked at the end of the night sky, looked in the direction of Mount Dibbing, and said slowly, Li Tianlan is coming. Everyone held their breaths. Li Tianlan. This name now represented a real and almost suffocating pressure, which no one could ignore. But, how is this possible? After an unknown amount of time, Tianhai Wuji muttered to himself. Jiang Shangyu looked up at the largest screen in the middle of the conference room. On the screen, there was still a scene of continuous gunfire. Li Tianlan was covered with blood in the endless gunfire, struggling to move forward. Who can tell me what this thing on the screen is? Jiang Shangyu suddenly asked. Tianhai Wuji's face was extremely pale. The giant whale, the vicious bird, and the black dragon all joined the fleet of Wuji Palace. They were also the main forces that restrained and even seriously injured Li Tianlan. If the Li Tianlan on the screen was just a shadow, with the technological level of the giant whale, the Li Tianlan on the screen can't be fake. The technological level of the giant whale is enough to detect whether Li Tianlan is real or not. Li Tianlan can't hide this from the giant whale. The Li Tianlan in the video can't be a problem. Jiang Shangyu suddenly interrupted Tianhai Wuji's words, but what if the video itself is fake? Tianhai Wuji froze for a moment and said subconsciously, how is it possible? Jiang Shangyu closed his eyes and took several deep breaths. Then he said calmly, help me contact the commander of the giant whale. Tianhai Wuji took out his mobile phone and quickly dialed. The dialing was normal. The communication was picked up almost immediately. Jiang Shangyu said indifferently, how is Li Tianlan? The screen in the conference room flickered slightly. The figure of the commander of the giant whale appeared on one of the screens. He glanced at Jiang Shangyu and said in a cold voice, everything is normal. Jiang Shangyu looked at him silently for a long time. Who are you? He suddenly asked, you are not the commander of the giant whale. Tell me, who are you? The commander of the giant whale was silent for a moment. Bang! The screen suddenly exploded for a moment. Countless snowflakes flashed on the screen. The figure of the commander of the giant whale disappeared completely. Then, the screens exploded one after another. In a few seconds, all the screens in the conference room turned into snowflakes. A fat man with a blurry silhouette appeared vaguely in the flashing snowflakes on the screen. He seemed to be smiling. It was extremely blurry and hard to see. But his voice rang clearly in the conference room. I am your ancestor. Chapter 999. The entire North Sea province was welcoming that incomparably dazzling sword light. The sword light crossed the north and south ends of Beihai with Chushui's city as the 7 points, forming a rainbow in the sky with an unimaginable length. The entire Beihai was shrouded in this rainbow. Night, sea, flying snow, rainbow, and lights. The rainbow that seemed to cross the endless distance landed gracefully on Mount Dibbing. This was a completely unimaginable picture, with a touch of soul-stirring brilliance and shock. The entire Mount Dibbing was quiet. At this moment, it was the first time in its life to see such a scene. The brilliant and dazzling light kept hitting the surface of Mount Dibbing. The sword energy kept gathering in the center of Mount Dibbing and turned into a storm. On the stage of Formidable Person, Wang Xingxiao looked down at this scene and didn't speak for a long time. An extremely loud sword sound suddenly rang out beside Wang Xingxiao. The stone of Formidable Person, which had stood on the stage of Formidable Person for hundreds of years, shook violently. In an instant, the silver moon inserted in the stone of Formidable Person rushed straight to the place where the light converged. The colorful light slowly spread and drowned the silver moon without any hindrance. The sword energy storm in the center of Mount Dibbing slowly stopped. A figure gradually appeared in the rainbow across the night sky. Li Tianlan slowly walked out of the light with a calm expression. Behind him, the rainbow light that filled the north and south ends of Beihai became fainter and fainter, and finally disappeared. Li Tianlan closed his eyes and felt the state of Ruthless. In this state, Ruthless could not be regarded as a real complete body, but it had already surpassed the original complete body. With Ruthless, Li Tianlan could almost feel the position of all the famous swords in the 13th floor, but he didn't feel the position of Broken Heart. More than 2 years ago, it was here that when he carefully hung Broken Heart on her chest, the famous sword and the woman seemed to completely disappear from his life. There was no Broken Heart in the 13th floor, but there were several other famous swords made of murderous weapons. If Ruthless in this state was at its peak, Li Tianlan's sword with all his strength would completely surpass the eternal sword above Mormon's. Li Tianlan gently took a breath and opened his eyes. Wang Xingxiao came to Li Tianlan from the stage of formidable person. The two looked at each other. Wang Xingxiao nodded and slowly said, "Welcome, Your Highness." It was His Highness. Everyone in the North Sea province, from top to bottom, only had His Majesty in their hearts. Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth and said with a faint smile, "Beihai is very lively." From the autumn waters to the Xingzhou province, he had seen countless battles along the way. Qiushui city had almost no power to fight back. Kanglan city had completely fallen. The situation in the other cities was not much better. Several superpowers and dozens of second-class forces. That night, almost the entire Dark World besieged the Wang family of Beihai. Xianyuan Wushang did control the 3 fleets of East Island, but he, who had the highest authority in East Island, didn't care about the other armed forces that joined Wuji Palace and Jifeng Sword Raining School. He and Li Tianlan had never met or communicated with each other, but he clearly saw through Li Tianlan's mind, or perhaps he understood the situation of Emperor Dong's palace. From Li Tianlan's point of view, the Wang family of Beihai naturally had to be preserved, and then maintain the balance between Zhongzhou State, Beihai, and Tiannan. But this so-called preservation did not necessarily mean that the Wang family of Beihai would be unscathed. In fact, it was more in the interest of Li Tianlan and Emperor Dong's palace to keep the Wang family of Beihai, which had suffered a great loss in armed forces. Beihai would win the final battle, but it would fall into a weak state. In this way, after the final battle, Emperor Dong's palace would face an unimaginable feast. The interest of Zhongzhou State could be used to build a new group. The victory of the final battle also meant that most of the superpowers and dozens of second-class forces in the coalition would disappear, and the entire Dark World would fall into a blank period in a short time. The Wang family of Beihai, which had suffered a great loss of vitality, couldn't take care of these things, and Emperor Dong's palace could take advantage of the situation to extend its tentacles to every corner of the Dark World, further catching up with the Wang family of Beihai. Beihai had to win. Li Tianlan had to come. Under this premise, Li Tianlan naturally hoped that the process would be beneficial to him. The overall quality of the soldiers who joined Wuji Palace and Jifeng Sword Raining School from East Island was not very high, but there were enough of them. These endless soldiers formed the main force against the Beihai Corps, and the elites of the coalition forces could exert their strength unscrupulously. Therefore, after the fall of Kanglan, several cities in the northern part of Beihai were not optimistic. At this time, there were also battles and battlefields of different degrees inside Xingzhou City, which was enough to explain the problem. "It's really lively." Wang Xingxiao nodded. "Each of us is mentally prepared for today's scene, and some people are destined to pay the price." Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. "So?" Wang Xingxiao took a deep look at Li Tianlan, and then at the windbreaker he was wearing. The black windbreaker seemed to become more and more gorgeous and exquisite because it was getting more complete, and the hem was longer. Every shining golden pattern on the clothes had an extremely sharp aura. Wang Xingxiao looked at it carefully for a while and laughed. "No matter what happens in the future, at least now, you are the most reliable ally of Beihai. I can trust you, and the Wang family of Beihai can trust you. So as long as you are here, Mount Dibbing doesn't need too many guards now. At this point, I don't mind that Beihai is more lively." Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly. Wang Xingxiao waved his palm in the night sky. Powerful auras burst out from every corner of Mount Dibing one after another. Li Tianlan saw a lot of acquaintances. The Enchantress, Firmament, Xia Huang, and so on were all famous thunder-shocking realm experts in the Wang family of Beihai. The devil troop that made ruthless show some desire. The heaven punishment troop. The internal defense force. Countless silhouettes emerged from the dark corners. It was a sea of people. Wang Xingxiao watched all this silently. His expression was calm, but his tone was a little ferocious. Tonight, everyone will pay the price. He stared into Li Tianlan's eyes and stared at them. His eyes were red, with some unwillingness, some helplessness, some jealousy, and some bitterness. All the emotions flowed in his eyes, and finally turned into relief. I'll give you the dark world you want. He smiled freely. I only want my Beihai. What you want and what I want, we can fulfill each other's wishes. Tonight. Li Tianlan nodded, reached out his hand, and said faintly, happy cooperation. Two hands clasped together. The next moment, Wang Xingxiao's voice rang through Mount Dibing. Everyone, go. Perhaps for the joint forces, the final battle in Beihai had begun for a while. But for the Wang family of Beihai, the real final battle had just begun. Chapter 1000. The sound of messy footsteps rushed across the street. Most of the street lamps on the side of the road had been broken, but the world was not dark. Snow was falling down quietly, covering the whole city. Faint explosions and roars could be heard faintly from afar. He moved his body with difficulty and observed the scene on the street through the gap of the door. In the distance, there was an incomparably tall figure standing quietly in the snowy sky. Bright electric arcs covered his entire body, and the faint light constantly spread around him. He carefully searched everything around him, and the sky full of electric arcs flashed again and again in the sky. His body was tense inside the crack of the door, and his eyes were sharp and firm. When the slowly spreading electric arc in the air expanded to its maximum range, it was less than 100 meters away from his current position. At a distance of dozens of meters, life and death were clear. The snow was flying all over the sky. The thunder-shocking realm expert in the air did not seem to gain anything. The shining electric arc around him quickly gathered around him. His figure flashed and rushed into the distance. Behind the door, he clutched his chest tightly. The coughing fit that he had been suppressing for a long time was accompanied by specks of blood that spurted out of his mouth. Captain. A hurried voice came from behind him. The footsteps were getting closer and closer. His swaying body was supported by a pair of arms behind him. How are you? Take a break. I'm fine. He shook his head hard, pulled himself together, and said reluctantly, it should be safe here for the time being. Get ready. We'll rush out and find more comrades. The situation is already very dangerous. Uncle, Dad said your injury is very serious now. You need treatment. A faint light suddenly lit up in the dark environment. A childish voice sounded behind the light. It was very light. You can't run around. Dad is preparing the medicine for your treatment. The faint candlelight swayed gently in the darkness. A little boy, who looked about 7 or 8 years old, came over. He held a candle in one hand and a roll of gauze in the other. He slowly took a step back and sat on the ground against the door, paying attention to the situation outside the crack of the door out of the corner of his eye. The little boy came closer and closer with the candle in his hand. He waved to the child, coughed and laughed. Little guy, what's your name? How old are you? My name is Lulu, I'm 7 years old. The child handed him the gauze and asked softly, Uncle, what's your name? Looking at the wound on his body, the child seemed to want to touch it, but he didn't dare. He only asked weakly, does it hurt? North Sea Legion, Heavenly Legion, 5th Division, 6th Division, Reconnaissance Company Captain Cheng Beijiang. The man touched the child's head and chuckled. Thank you, and thank your father." He took the gauze from the child's hand and removed it. With the help of several team members, he bandaged the wound and sat on the ground, gasping for breath. Lioli City, 2:40 a.m., Central Avenue. The battle was still ringing out in the distance. Cheng Beijiang listened to the explosion in the distance, and his eyes became more and more determined. The child stood in front of him and stared blankly at his face, murmuring, "Where's the trump card, you know?" Cheng Beijiang chuckled in surprise. "Of course." The little boy suddenly became excited. "Uncle, my dream is to become a soldier when I grow up. I want to protect and fight for North Sea. Protect North Sea, fight for North Sea." Cheng Beijiang murmured to himself. The corner of his mouth twitched fiercely, and he smiled bitterly. They were indeed one of the trump cards of the North Sea Legion. Even in the entire Zhongzhou state, the Heavenly Legion could be said to be second to none in the reconnaissance army, and the 5th Division, where he was in, was the core of the Heavenly Legion. Every regiment and company under it had its own glorious history. In terms of combat effectiveness, Cheng Beijiang was 32 years old this year. He was in the fire-flaming realm and was the captain of the company. This was enough to show the strength of the Heavenly Legion. The Heavenly Legion was one of the trump cards of the North Sea Legion. Every soldier in the army was definitely the kind of soldier who could be looked up to by others. Cheng Beijiang, who was only in charge of a small team in his own company, could not be regarded as a regular officer. He was just a sergeant, but if he were in another army, he might not be willing to be a company commander. This was the pride of the North Sea Legion and the Heavenly Legion. However, this pride was completely shattered tonight. The word failure, not only the Heavenly Legion, but also the entire North Sea Legion had never thought about it in recent decades. They were proud to think that they were the strongest army in the world, the most elite soldiers, and they despised everyone else. The more proud they were, the more humiliated they were. The sudden outbreak of a large-scale battle made the entire Heavenly Legion completely sober up in blood and death. They were originally the army stationed in Empress City, across the river from Kanglan City. But now, they appeared in Lioli City behind Empress City. This could no longer be described as a failure. It was a complete fiasco. Face to face, a fiasco without any reason. The Heavenly Legion came to Empress City from Xingzhou last year, which was enough to show that Mount Dibbing had expected today's battle, so they let the trump card of the North Sea Legion come to Empress City. Wang Xingxiao's idea was very simple. Once the decisive battle in Beihai broke out, with Qin Fangqing's interference, it would be difficult for Beihai to completely control the south of Kanglan River. In this way, Empress City in the north of Kanglan River became the top priority, and the Heavenly Legion was the most important line of defense in Empress City. In a sense, Empress City could even be said to be the front line of the decisive battle in Beihai. As long as Empress City was held, when the situation of the decisive battle was clear, Mount Dibbing would send enough forces to cross the river, recapture the southern area of Beihai, and move the front line to the south. The Heavenly Legion was originally full of confidence in this task. But what they encountered was extremely humiliating and deathly pale. The fierce battle in Empress City lasted for the 3rd hour. The Heavenly Legion was completely scattered. With less than 15,000 people, they faced Jifeng Sword Training School, more than 60,000 soldiers of Wuji Palace, and various masters of the joint forces. The commander-in-chief of the Heavenly Legion, who was born in the Qin family, died on the spot. Relying on the internal communication command system, the Heavenly Legion began to retreat. They planned to retreat to Lioli City, reorganize the soldiers, and then start to fight back. Empress City completely fell. Along the way, the Heavenly Sky Army's convoy was full of defeated soldiers. Obviously, the joint forces were not satisfied with the current result. More and more soldiers poured in from Kanglan City. After occupying Empress City, the cannon fodder of Jifeng Sword Training School and Wuji Palace directly rushed out of Empress City without any hesitation and followed the Heavenly Legion to Lioli City. The Heavenly Legion's advantages in equipment and personnel quality were infinitely reduced in front of enemies several times their own. The army of Jifeng Sword Raining School and Wuji Palace drowned the Heavenly Legion. The thunder-shocking realm masters of the joint forces were completely and scrupulously assassinating the middle and senior members of the Heavenly Legion. They were routed. They were constantly routed. They came to Lioli City, but they didn't have any time to rest. The entire Lioli City directly fell into the cruelest street fighting. Qing Beijiang's team had 11 people, but from Empress City to Lioli City, he only had 2 comrades left. The battle in Lioli City was still going on. Qing Beijiang gritted his teeth and suddenly stood up. Blood dyed the gauze red, and the red color kept spreading on his body. Qing Beijiang looked at the 2 comrades beside him and said in a deep voice, "Let's kill our way out." Kill our way out? With your current injury, you're already strong-willed enough to stay awake. Do you still want to kill our way out? How can we kill them? A young man in a white coat walked over with a large pile of medicine. Qing Beijiang gritted his teeth and said nothing. His team sneaked into this clinic by the roadside when they were being chased by a thunder-shocking realm expert of the joint forces. The doctor in the clinic was tutoring his son with his homework. Seeing the military uniforms they were wearing, he gave them a lot of medicine without saying anything. At this moment, feeling the bursts of numbness in his body, Qing Beijiang shook his head fiercely. Because the medicine the doctor gave him not long ago was obviously anesthetic. Beihai is very dangerous tonight, isn't it? The doctor took a cup, poured out the medicine, handed it to Qing Beijiang, and said in a low voice, "Since His Majesty left more than 2 years ago, Beihai has been very dangerous, right?" He paused and said a little blankly, "Can we still make it through?" "Of course." Qing Beijiang hesitated for a moment, took the medicine, and said calmly, "The safety of Beihai shouldn't be guarded by one person and one sword. It should be guarded by thousands of troops of the Beihai Corps." He turned his head to look out of the window and said softly, "From now on, the Beihai Corps will not retreat." The battle in the distance didn't stop. Instead, it became more and more intense. Qing Beijiang pushed open the door of the clinic and said calmly, "There's no way out." Chapter 1001. At 3:00 in the morning. Beihai was getting more and more chaotic. This was a night that was destined to leave a deep mark in the history of Beihai. In the past 100 or even hundreds of years, the whole of Beihai suffered an unprecedented blow overnight and suffered heavy losses. The southern part of Beihai completely fell, and the once prosperous Queen City was in a mess. The elites of Jifeng Sword Raining School and Wuji Palace fought fiercely with Beihai in Lioli City. There was no advance or retreat. There was no attack or defense. There was only attack and counterattack. The soldiers who had no way out seemed to become the most elite and cold-blooded warriors of sacrifice. The 2 superpowers of East Island tried their best to break through the defense line of Lioli City. The elites of Beihai fought back at all costs. No one cared about the loss. The 2 sides were fighting head-on, and no one was willing to take a step back. The sound of fighting and roaring spread throughout the city. Everyone in Beihai was fighting back with red eyes. Forward. Forward with all their strength. 14 minutes ago, Jiang Cheng, the second in command of the Heavenly Army and an expert at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm from the Jiang family of Kanglan, died under the siege of Jifeng Sword Raining School and Wuji Palace. Almost half of the city could see the dazzling thunder and lightning that Jiang Cheng gave out before he died. His last order resounded in the ears of every soldier of Beihai in the dazzling light. He shouted at the top of his voice, determined and crazy. That was the last military order. Heavenly Army, go forward, or die. The thunder and lightning spread wildly under the night sky. Jiang Cheng's last outburst engulfed the 2 guests of Jifeng Sword Raining School. From that moment on, all the elites of Beihai went crazy. Everyone seemed to have lost their minds as they desperately rushed forward and killed. Go forward. Or die. There was no retreat, only desperate counterattack at all costs. Under the extremely decisive order, Liuli's city was stained with blood almost everywhere. From the moment Jiang Qing sacrificed his life, this dispute was doomed to have only two endings. Either the heavenly army died, and the elites of the two superpowers of East Island rushed over. Or the elites of the two superpowers of East Island were completely killed, and the crazy heavenly army counterattacked Queen City. The whole Liuli city was completely in a deadlock. In the conference room on the top floor of Kanglan Hotel, all the top officials of the joint forces had fallen into chaos. At first, it was just a discussion, but the discussion turned into a discussion, and the discussion turned into a quarrel. It seemed that the joint forces, which had the upper hand, were getting more and more chaotic. Even several Invincible Realm experts looked gloomy. Jiang Shangyu stood in front of the huge screen and looked at the scene on the screen. He had been silent for a long time. The big screen, which had been divided into countless scenes, was extremely lively. The screen that was originally showing the decisive battle in the North Sea was now playing an extremely comical image. To be exact, including Jiang Shangyu, all the higher-ups of the joint forces present were being taught a lesson. They were being taught some knowledge about East Island. Have you heard of Maria Ozawa? Have you heard of Shoi Fuku? Do you know who Yuichi Hitano is? You know that angels aren't cute, right? Does Big Qiao know about Weijiu? Sanshang Yia? Five Vine Orchid? Miki Kamitani? Masato Shimizu? Hashimoto Minoru? Love of Crete? There will always be one for you. Even if you don't know it, it doesn't matter. The chubby Mr. Shenyuan put all the wonderful works on the big screen in the conference room. One by one, he brainwashed all the Invincible Realm experts and the higher-ups of the joint forces in turn. The teacher's singing was beautiful and mellow. Everyone in the conference room felt dizzy and restless. The original fighting scenes were replaced one by one, and all the communications were unilaterally blocked. Jiang Shangyu turned off the big screen directly, indicating that he didn't want to learn and didn't like to learn. The blocking was turned off for nearly half an hour before it was turned on again. The big screen, which was still divided into countless scenes, finally lost the teacher's conscientious figures. But the picture that appeared in front of everyone looked even weirder. The fighting was still going on. In a short time, Jiang Shangyu saw himself being killed countless times on the screen. Some died in the hands of Tianhai Wuji in Mount Dibbing, some died in the hands of Moraid in the conference room, and some were killed by Wang Xiaoyao in front of the hotel. What was worse was that he was drowned in the toilet by Yagyu Kurasumi. Countless pictures were randomly woven. Wang Xiaoyao, Yagyu Kurasumi, Tianhai Wuji, Moraid, and everyone saw how they died on the screen. The quarrel seemed to start at that time. With the communication blocked, they were completely in the dark now. They would see whatever the fat man, who claimed to be the ancestor of the left and right people, wanted them to see. In the world of the internet, he unscrupulously weaved all kinds of pictures that had no traces of falsification. But they didn't know what the real situation was. They didn't know at all. They didn't know at all. From their position, they could feel that the firepower support from the sea had completely disappeared. Li Tianlan leaped over Kanglan City. But obviously, East Island didn't realize this. In the pictures woven by the fat man, the people of East Island might have thought that they were about to win. They had completely lost contact with all their subordinates, and there was no way to change the combat order. With Beihai as the center, such a combat radius was frighteningly large. If they had to rely on manpower to convey orders, their entire combat target would become extremely stiff. All kinds of quarrels rang in Jiang Shangyu's ears. Some people even began to consider the problem of retreat. Everyone. Jiang Shangyu suddenly opened his mouth. His voice was very light, but it swept through the whole room very clearly. The conference room suddenly became quiet for a moment. In fact, there is nothing to think about, and there is nothing to quarrel about, is there? Jiang Shangyu narrowed his eyes and glanced at the whole room. Things are already very obvious. You said retreat, but how? Leave Beihai by yourself? Who is willing to do that? If you are willing to give up your subordinates, give up everything you invested in the final battle, and want to retreat, then I have no opinion. You can go. Or, walk all over Beihai on your own feet and bring your subordinates back one by one. Several leaders of the second-class forces who had clamored to retreat immediately looked at each other, and no one spoke. We all know that it's impossible. Jiang Shangyu said calmly, so, our only choice is to attack. We can only attack. The situation is indeed very passive now, but it's not that there is no way. At least before the final battle, everyone has given their subordinates clear enough combat goals. So even if we have lost contact with each other now, I think they should know what they are going to do. I have never doubted the execution ability of my soldiers. A tall white man stood up and said in a deep voice, I'm afraid that the fat man who controls the communication network will give them wrong orders in our name. This is indeed possible. Jiang Shangyu nodded. But it shouldn't happen until now. What's the reason? Tianhai Wuji looked at Jiang Shangyu seriously. East Island had the most elites joining Wuji Palace, and their strength was also the strongest, much stronger than Jifeng Sword Raining School. In this case, one could imagine the pressure he was under. If the fat man came from Beihai, he would indeed do this. Not to mention our elites who are fighting for their lives outside, even we have been heavily surrounded now. But none of this happened. Jiang Shangyu smiled. I don't think the fat man can't do this. I think he can do it, but he doesn't want to do it. So, the fat man probably doesn't belong to Beihai. The most likely possibility is that he is from Emperor Dong's palace. Making Beihai suffer heavy losses but still have the qualification to survive is in the interest of Emperor Dong's palace. Similarly, this is also our opportunity. The fat man won't attack us for the time being, because he is still waiting for the Wang family of Beihai to continue to lose blood. And we have indeed lost contact with our direct line of descent, but their battle plan should not be changed, because only in this way, Beihai will confront us head-on. Li Tianlan should have arrived at Mount Dibing now. The only thing Wang Xingxiao can do is to rely on Li Tianlan to protect the safety of Mount Dibing and send all the elites of Beihai to support Beihai. So, if I'm not wrong, the defense of Mount Dibing is already very weak now. After a pause, Jiang Shangyu continued, if you don't count Li Tianlan. So, Moraid looked at Jiang Shangyu with fiery eyes, somewhat expectant. So, Jiang Shangyu said blandly, I think it's time for us to take action. Chapter 1002. It was 4:00 in the morning in Liuli City. Bang! Gold and iron collided, and sparks flew everywhere. The hard and sharp stiletto collided with the short saber in the style of East Island. The two weapons slid down, and sparks bloomed under the flying snow for a moment. Two figures crossed each other. Qing Beijiang, whose face was pale, gasped violently. He stood back to back with his two opponents and looked around vigilantly. Messy footsteps came from all directions. In the shortest time, 3 elite squads of Jifeng Sword Raining School appeared from different places, stepping on the snowflakes. His vision had become a little blurry. His arm holding the stiletto began to shake uncontrollably. Qing Beijiang gritted his teeth and suddenly laughed. I can still kill 2 more squads. What do you two say? Ahem, the 2 young teammates beside him laughed at the same time. Then leave the rest of the squads to us. Anyway, Captain, it's worth it tonight. Yeah, it's worth it. Qing Beijiang, whose eyes were a little dazed, murmured to himself. He looked at the opponents in front of him and directly rushed up. After leaving the small clinic for temporary recuperation, they charged toward the area with the highest fighting intensity. They killed all the way and had rushed through a whole block. The 4 squads of Wuji Palace and Jifeng Sword Raining School were all killed by Qing Beijiang's team. The elites of Jifeng Sword Raining School and Wuji Palace couldn't compare with the Beihai Corps in terms of quality at all. Their so-called elites had only reached the threshold of the lowest 4 realms of martial arts. Most of them were in the chi-controlling realm. Very few of them were in the ice-condensing realm, and those in the fire-flaming realm were already considered high-level figures. But there were so many of them. When almost endless elites came in batches, the gap in the number of people was enough to make up for the gap in the combat effectiveness of the two sides. Qing Beijiang almost killed through a block before he met a real decent opponent. The opponent's strength was not strong. He was in the fire-flaming realm, a little weaker than Qing Beijiang, but he was held up by the opponent for nearly 5 minutes when he was seriously injured. As the three squads slowly surrounded them, their situation became worse and worse. Without reinforcements, everyone in Qing Beijiang's squad knew very well that this might be the last battle of their lives. There was no hesitation, no fear, no hesitation. The moment the two members behind Qing Beijiang tensed up, Qing Beijiang tightened his grip on the weapon in his hand and rushed towards the opponent standing in front of him. Intense flames instantly ignited in his hands. The raging fire covered his right fist and spread along the blade of the stiletto. It quickly turned into a meter-long saber. The saber burned with the wind and snow as it slashed forward with endless loyalty and love for the army and the North Sea. Qing Beijiang's opponent, who had been staring at him silently, took a step back, his eyes cold and mocking. The next second, an ice wall rose in front of Qing Beijiang. The two squads on his left and right charged forward. The wind howled and the cold frost piled up in front of him, obscuring his vision. Kill! Everything in front of him became more and more blurry. Qing Beijiang roared with all his might as he slashed down with the long sword in his hand. The burning long sword tore through the ice wall with great force. Broken ice and snow danced in the air. The saber directly split the nearest ice-freezing mirror elite into two halves. The blade flipped under the night sky and stabbed into the chest of another opponent. Puff! A dull sound accompanied by sharp pain rang out. An extremely narrow short blade stabbed into Qing Beijiang's waist at the same time. Blood spattered. Qing Beijiang, whose face was completely distorted, shook his body. The long flame saber in his hand disappeared, and the sharp stiletto stabbed backward without any hesitation. He turned his body slightly, and the blade of the stiletto stabbed directly into the attacker's abdomen. The moment he turned his body, the fire-flaming realm expert who had just taken a step back suddenly rushed forward. Raging fire and snow flew. Qing Beijiang had no intention of giving up. He pulled out the stiletto with a grim smile, and raging fire began to burst out from all over his body. They would die together. The warriors of North Sea were never afraid of death. Crack! A subtle sound rang out a second before he burst out with all his strength. The next moment, the raging fire on Qing Beijiang's body completely disappeared, leaving only severe pain and numbness. The enemy of the fire-flaming realm in front of him also collapsed to the ground. A shining electric arc exploded between the two of them. The violent current shuttled back and forth between their bodies, directly interrupting Qing Beijiang's last desperate struggle. Qing Beijiang's body fell to the ground, and he tried to keep his eyes open. Vaguely, in a blur, a figure walked up to him, lowered his head, and looked at him in silence. Such a person shouldn't die here. He looked down at Qing Beijiang and said in a flat tone. Qing Beijiang's eyes suddenly widened. His pale face quickly turned red with anger, and his expression looked even more distorted. Because the other party spoke Chinese. His pronunciation was perfect. It was not the perfect pronunciation that foreigners learn Chinese from. It was a natural standard, even with a hint of Yuzhou accent. What did it mean? What did it mean? In extreme anger, Qing Beijiang's voice was trembling. Come with me. The voice continued, many legions of Zhongzhou state have left North Sea. I can arrange for them to go anywhere they want. A real warrior should serve the country, not become a private lackey. You, Qing Beijiang's voice was ferocious. You colluded with Jifeng Sword Training School and Wuji Palace? It's just cooperation. The man's tone was extremely calm. I can give you a chance to live. Leave North Sea and come with me. Come with me, Cheng Beijiang sneered. Do you think anyone in North Sea will really go with you? Of course. The thunder-shocking realm expert nodded and said naturally, I saved a lot of people tonight. They are all my colleagues. Heh, Cheng Beijiang gasped violently, gritted his teeth, and said, Bullsh *T. He didn't believe that anyone would really go with him. Even if there were such people, there wouldn't be many of them. He grabbed the bayonet, jumped up, and tried his best to stab the man's body. Bang! The thunder-shocking realm expert on the opposite side suddenly raised his leg and kicked Cheng Beijiang into the snow again. Blood flowed out of his body and dyed the snow on the ground red. He took 2 steps forward, looked at Cheng Beijiang, and said gloomily, Do you want to die? Cheng Beijiang said nothing. You gave up the chance to live. He said slowly, I really hate the so-called Beihai Corps. They act like they're the best in the world. In the past many years, North Sea had Wang Tianzong. He could protect North Sea alone with his sword. Now that Wang Tianzong is gone, what are you? Huh? North Sea, heh, North Sea should have died a long time ago. You refused my invitation and want to show your loyalty and backbone? You'd rather die than submit? Then go to hell. I'll fulfill your wish. His voice suddenly paused. Then he fell completely silent. A tiny flame appeared in front of Cheng Beijiang. The flames slowly swam around Cheng Beijiang's body, finally protecting his entire body within it. The thunder-shocking realm expert standing in front of Cheng Beijiang was motionless, as if facing a formidable enemy. The flame burned elegantly and quietly in front of him. But it was not the orange-red that a normal flame should have. Instead, it was an extremely dazzling white. The white flame gently jumped and twisted, completely merging with the snow on the ground. The flame flickered. Every time the white light flickered, it carried a sword intent that was enough to make him tremble with fear. Even compared to the weird white flame of the fire-flaming realm, the sword energy in the flame was the source of his most uneasiness and even the most panic. Who? He suddenly raised his head and said in a low voice. There's one thing wrong. A light and pleasant young female voice rang in the air. It was indifferent, cold, but extremely serious. North Sea has Sword Emperor, but the safety of North Sea has never been guarded by one person and one sword. Snow was flying all over the sky. In the night sky, a slim figure in white clothes and burning with white flames slowly descended from the sky. White snow, white fire, and white clothes. She slowly floated down in the air, as if she had completely merged with the whole world. You're not qualified to comment on North Sea. Her serious and cold voice rang out. The white flame on the ground suddenly jumped for a moment. Extremely sharp sword chi burst out from the flames in an instant. The sword light drowned the thunder and lightning arcs and pierced into the thunder-shocking realm expert's body without any hindrance. A mist of blood suddenly burst out of the snow. The dense sword light flew wantonly. The nearby elite team of Jifeng Sword Training School and Wuji Palace instantly fell silent. The young woman in the air landed in front of Cheng Beijiang. Cheng Beijiang opened his eyes wide, but he couldn't see anything clearly. In a trance, he seemed to see a young woman, proud and elegant, like a fairy falling into the mortal world. You are, he hesitated for a moment. The young woman looked down at him and took out the medicine she carried with her. Her tone seemed to have some warmth. Sorry. She said softly, we're late. My name is Huangfu Qiushui. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.